Chapter 951. As the saying goes, the higher you stand, the further you can see. Wuming, who was flying in the sky, could easily see the north wall. Wuming once again sighed as he looked at the north wall that traversed the east and west of Mesopotamia, not far away. This north wall was built by manpower. If it could be passed down to future generations, it would certainly become an ancient monument not inferior to the pyramids and the Great Wall. After all, it was a defensive barrier against monsters. However, the North Wall would not be passed down to future generations. After all, it was a special place called singularity. Things in singularity would be corrected by correct history. Perhaps it would be more serious than the legendary hanging courtyard of Babylon. The North Wall would be completely lost in the long river of history. However, he still had to overcome the difficulties in front of him. Otherwise, forget about future generations, the entire history of mankind may disappear. Kalas, help me find the place with the most prominent signs of life as a landing point. The most prominent signs of life represented the most people. In this case, the chances of encountering the commander of the North Wall would be higher. Wuming searched for signs of life below and came to the place with the most prominent signs of life. The soldiers below naturally noticed Wuming in the sky. They originally thought that it was an enemy attack, but it turned out to be their god. Is that Hyunryong-sama? Hyunryong-sama has come to the North Wall? Hyunryong-sama? In an instant, the soldiers began to cheer and shouted at Wuming. The gods of the gods' era were absolute to humans. They were even more powerful than human kings. Although the current Mesopotamia was at the end of the gods' era, the people here were still full of respect for the gods. However, this made Wuming very helpless. He didn't know what to say. Why did the gods like to spread their faith and collect believers everywhere? Because the ancient human hearts were very simple. If you were good to them, they would praise you, welcome you, and praise you. Besides the evil gods, who didn't like such humans. Wuming didn't put on airs and flew straight down. It could be seen that these soldiers were conscientious in their duties. Even in the face of their Lord God, the soldiers who were guarding their posts did not move at all. Other things aside, Leonidas I's training of the soldiers did make them more dutiful. However, the nearby soldiers and logistics personnel, who were not in important positions, all came to Wuming's side and knelt down. Even the soldiers who were standing guard at their posts bowed to Wuming in respect of the gods. I didn't come here to accept your worship. All of you, return to your post. You are the front line, and the safety of the rear is at stake. Therefore, move out. Wuming's last sentence was infused with magic. His voice, which was full of majesty but not strict, was transmitted to the ears of everyone present. Oh, oh, oh! His sonorous and forceful words filled everyone's ears, causing them to cheer energetically. Although, in accordance with the will of the god, everyone returned to their posts. Sir Hyunryong, why are you here today? A rough voice with a hint of delicacy came from afar. Wuming looked up. It was a brawny man with most of his skin exposed. He was wearing a Spartan-style helmet and a red cloak. His exposed skin was full of explosive muscles, giving people an extreme sense of security. So it's the king of Sparta. It's been a long time. Wuming showed a relieved expression. The person who came was one of the lancers summoned by Gilgamesh, the king of Sparta, Leonidas I. Wuming only saw him once when Leonidas I was summoned. After that, Wuming quickly left. It seemed that Wuming's idea was right. The place with the most prominent signs of life was indeed the forced commander, Leonidas I. Just call me Leonidas. After all, I'm now the subject of the king of Gilgamesh. It was inappropriate for a subject to call himself a king. Leonidas said as he walked in front of Wuming. You look good. The soldiers have also been trained by you to be so strong. No wonder you're the king of Sparta. After all, Sparta had become a special synonym in the future. The humans of this era are strong and have an extremely simple temperament. I didn't spend much effort to train them. Wu Ming nodded. It's good that you're satisfied with the physical fitness of the humans of this era. By the way, I'm here on the orders of King Gilgamesh. However, Wu Ming only said this, and Leonidas guessed the reason. It's because of the information I sent to Uruk. The suspected gathering of a large number of demonic beasts was enough to attract attention. Yes, I took over the military advisor's workshop to explore. I did see a large number of demonic beasts gathering in the city of Nippur. Wu Ming told him the information he received. Have you been to the military advisor's workshop? If it's you, you can indeed see that scene. The existence of Zhuge Kong Ming was not a secret to Leonidas I. When Gilgamesh summoned again and selected many servants to carry out the decapitation plan, Leonidas I, who was burning with passion, also wanted to participate. This kind of suicidal behavior was similar to Leonidas I leading 300 people to fight against the Persian army. It could be said that it was the most exciting thing to arouse Leonidas I's passion. In the end, he was stopped by Zhuge Kongming, who advised him. Only then did Leonidas I settle down. After all, as a defensive talent who led a mere 300 people to delay the Persian army until the Allies retreated, how could he be a suicide squad? The most important thing to highlight Leonidas I's value was the defense against the demonic beasts in the North Wall. And Leonidas I did not disappoint everyone's expectations of him, and he did not disappoint himself. He successfully led the humans to resist the attack of the demonic beasts for half a year. However, this time it's really a total attack of the demonic beasts. Leonidas I's face, which could not be seen by others because of the helmet, showed a trace of relief. He also guessed that this would be the result. As a soldier, a king, Leonidas I had been collecting information from Uruk, and he was also aware of the turmoil in the southwest and northeast. The attacks of the demonic beasts in both places ended in failure. Perhaps the only choice was to gather the demonic beasts to attack the North Wall. If this dragged on, it would indeed have a negative impact on the demonic beasts. Not only that, just now we received news that the territory of the Quetzalcoatl has also suffered a fierce attack from the demonic beast. Chaldea's group has been sent by King Gilgamesh to support them. Could it be? Leonidas I seemed to have thought of something, and his voice became surprised. It's probably as you think. The demonic beasts are preparing to attack the humans from all directions, and at the same time, eliminate the Quetzalcoatl. To be able to attack the remaining humans in Mesopotamia from the north and south, and also prepare to eliminate the pillar goddess of the Three Goddesses Alliance, the other party must have sufficient confidence to do so. In this way, the number of demonic beasts was probably unimaginable. This is really crazy. Leonidas gasped. But isn't this also the beginning of our counterattack? If the demonic beasts were to attack in full force, the remaining 5 demonic beast commanders would definitely appear. After all, the battlefield was split into the southern forest and the north wall. If it was really a general attack, there was a high chance that Gorgon would appear. If Wu Ming and the others took the opportunity to eliminate Gorgon, who had Tiamat's authority, then the humans in Mesopotamia would be able to overcome this crisis. Among the Three Goddesses Alliance, the Quetzalcoatl was the most rebellious and stood on the side of the humans. The underworld goddess Ereshkigal could not leave the underworld. More importantly, Ereshkigal's attitude towards the humans was similar to that of the Quetzalcoatl. Although they had only met once, Wu Ming's intuition told him that Ereshkigal was a goddess who wanted to help the humans. It was probably like how the Quetzalcoatl was preparing to use her own methods to save the humans. Therefore, as long as the demonic beasts and the goddess of demonic beasts were eliminated, then they could deal with Ereshkigal, who was thinking for the humans. At that time, when she found out that 2 of the 3 goddesses had been defeated by the humans, and she became a threat to the humans in Mesopotamia, Ereshkigal would probably give up on being the enemy of the humans. Because there were enemies that threatened the humans, Ereshkigal would provide special assistance to the humans. But if one day, all the enemies that threatened the humans disappeared, and her special method of assistance became the last enemy that threatened the humans, was there a need to continue? With Ereshkigal's dignified personality, she would probably stop. Therefore, it was not a bad idea to wipe out the forces of the magical beast goddess that had come out in full force. While thinking, Wuming said, "That's why Gilgamesh sent me to the North Wall." As for whether it was Gilgamesh's idea, it didn't matter. Anyway, Gilgamesh would definitely allow Wuming to act on his own. So that's how it is. Leonidas, I also understood what Wuming meant. This was indeed a good way to deal with the goddess of magical beasts, and it was to deal with her in one go. But you have to be prepared, because I'm the only one who can support the North Wall. These words surprised Leonidas I again. Northwest is a Bif Mountain, the territory of the Mistress of the Heavens, Goddess Ishtar. There was a big change in that direction before. It should be because you and Ishtar fought. I heard that Goddess Ishtar has been subdued by you. Can't she come to support you? Probably because of the existence of the feathered serpent god, the accelerated tunnel, and other convenient means of communication, Leonidas I had already received the news that Uruk Yunryong has subdued the Mistress of the Heavens, Goddess Ishtar. Wuming didn't mean to hide it, and since Leonidas I also knew about this, then Wuming had to inform Leonidas I about the specific situation. Indeed, as you received the news, Goddess Ishtar is now on our side, but she's not free. When I was flying in the sky just now, I sent her a message. I asked her to support other places. Is it the territory of the southern feathered serpent god? Isn't there already support from Chaldea there? Leonidas I was quite puzzled. Although the enemy was divided into two parts to attack, the North Wall was much more dangerous and important than the forest of the feathered serpent god. Leonidas I didn't understand. How could Wuming ignore the overall situation? However, the truth was not what Leonidas I thought. I didn't ask her to support the feathered serpent god. Then, Wuming looked to the southeast. I asked her to go to the Persian Gulf. Southeast, near the Persian Gulf, Ishtar was flying on Anna, who was sitting on the sky ship, toward the Persian Gulf with a look of displeasure. Damn Hyunryong, is he really going to squeeze me to the extreme? Ishtar was quite angry at the moment. Ishtar was flying freely in the sky before, fully relieving the anger she suffered from Gilgamesh. However, just now, Wuming used the connection between the two sides after signing the contract to give Ishtar an order. Wuming's order was like this: go to the Persian Gulf to investigate. If you encounter demonic beasts, stop them and don't let them come ashore. However, Ishtar scoffed. At most, there are some Kururu that accidentally flowed here along the Euphrates River and the Tigris River. Not to mention that these demonic beasts can't set off a storm. Moreover, Kururu can only move in the water. Ishtar stopped and looked at the Persian Gulf below, full of resentment. In the end, because it's related to demonic beasts, I can't refuse that bastard's order. So, Ishtar, who didn't know that there was an emergency in the North Wall and the South Jungle, thought that we were playing tricks on her. She came to the Persian Gulf with grief and helplessness in her heart. There are no demonic beasts here. Not to mention the demonic beasts that can go ashore, the Kururu in the water almost disappeared during this time. Ishtar patrolled the waters of the Persian Gulf, ignoring the kneeling humans on the ground, and ended the patrol. There are no demonic beasts at all, let's go. At the moment, Ishtar wanted to leave here and find a family with a lot of gemstones to do a good deal to ease her current bad mood. However, at this moment, there was a sudden magical reaction under the water of the Persian Gulf. Ishtar noticed it in an instant, but then, her eyes widened. At this moment, Ishtar also understood that Wuming was not playing tricks on her. Demonic beasts really appeared in the Persian Gulf, and the number was extremely shocking. Chapter 952. This magic? How many magical beasts are there? Feeling the rapid emergence of a large amount of magic in the Persian Gulf, Ishtar's voice could not help but tremble. The magic emitted by each magical beast was not amazing. What shocked Ishtar was the number of magical beasts emitting magic. Ants were not terrible, but if there were a large number of ants, they could bite an elephant to death. However, not to mention biting an elephant to death, if there were enough ants, they could drown an elephant just by relying on their numbers. The amazing magic that emerged from the Persian Gulf was caused by the convergence of a large number of magical beasts. Because of the large number of magical beasts emitting magic, the surface of the Persian Gulf even became a little turbulent, like the coast was about to be hit by a storm. The people at the Persian Gulf Observatory also noticed the turbulence in the Persian Gulf and went to the seaside to check the situation. However, they saw a figure emerge from the Persian Gulf. "There are humans in the sea?" Looking at the figure, it seemed to be a woman. The people who saw this scene were shocked. They thought that someone had fallen into the water and immediately prepared to save the person who had fallen into the water. However, before they could act, one figure after another emerged from the water, and the strange thing was that these figures all looked the same. This strange scene made the people standing by the sea fall into silence, as if they could not react. No. No! That's the magical beast Kururu? It was Unknown who suddenly said this, but the silence turned into panic before anyone could react. Everyone looked again. The figures in the water were not people who had fallen into the water. They were clearly ugly magical beasts with the lower body of a fish and the upper body of a human. After all, even if there was only one magical beast, it was extremely fatal to non-combatants like them, not to mention that there was more than one here. Don't panic. I remember King Gilgamesh said that this magical beast called Kururu can only move in the water. There is no example of it going ashore. Although this person's voice was quite panicked, it reminded everyone. There weren't many mass-produced magical beasts in Kururu that entered the Persian Gulf through the Euphrates and Tigris rivers. After Gilgamesh sent people to clean them up for a few days, these magical beasts basically disappeared from the Persian Gulf. Although there might have been some lucky survivors, the people here had never encountered them again. It was true that he hadn't encountered any before, but it wasn't a good thing to encounter such a large number of magical beasts. Fortunately, the magical beasts they encountered were Kururu and couldn't go ashore. Otherwise, they would be in danger. Thinking of this, the surrounding people gradually calmed down, and even bravely observed the large number of Kururu in the water. Some of them only had a little contact with this kind of magical beast, and some didn't even have the slightest contact with it. Humans were always curious about the unknown, which led to the next scene. Although this magical beast looks like a human, it is still a little ugly. And it looks like a woman, but it's really not pleasing to the eye. That's right, the other magical beasts are wild beasts, but why do these Kururu look so strange? Probably because they can only live in the water. It didn't matter if they were bold or fearless. In short, because they weren't threatened by the life-threatening danger, they all began to criticize Kurulu. Ishtar, who was flying in the sky, saw the behavior of these humans, and Ishtar commented on it. These fools. It was normal for humans to not know about magical beasts, but as a member of the gods, Ishtar knew about them. Although Ishtar had never seen this kind of magical beast, from the past rumors, Ishtar knew that these magical beasts didn't only live in the water. After all, they were also known as the winged mermaid. As the name implied, they had wings. Poochie, as if something had broken out of its body, a pair of large wings grew out of the back of a Kururu. Then, the wings on the back of the Kururu flapped slowly, bringing the Kururu into the air. The tail of its lower body was still flapping subconsciously, as if it was a little uncomfortable. Then, one by one, the Kururu came out of the back of a large number of Kururu, and a pair of wings grew out of the back of a large number of Kururu, bringing countless of them into the sky together. the magical beasts, kururu, also known as the winged mermaid, all flew into the sky while the nearby humans were in a daze. It's over. It was unknown who said this, but the atmosphere of despair spread among the crowd. Facing the magical beasts, kururu that could fly out of the water and into the sky, there was only one outcome for these non-combatants, and that was death. Some people even sat on the ground as if they had completely given up, quietly waiting for the arrival of death. At this moment, a voice like the cry of the goddess of victory sounded in everyone's ears. Ungal ta kaigal shi, mountain-shaking star salary? A dazzling light comparable to Venus directly hit the group of kururu magical beasts in the sky, and an explosion occurred suddenly. Boom! The light covered everyone's eyes, and in the next second, the crowd screamed in panic. Wah! Due to the airflow caused by the explosion, the people were scared shitless. But fortunately, no one was in life-threatening danger. The wind and waves soon subsided, and when people looked up to check the situation, they saw the goddess of Venus. Mistress of the heavens? It's Lady Ishtar? It's Lady Ishtar, the goddess who often plunder my family's gems? Lady Ishtar saved us? Ignoring some of the strange sentences, Ishtar's ears were filled with the cheers of the humans for her. After seeing the goddess, the people no longer panicked, not only because Ishtar saved them, but also because the humans' dependence on the goddess had an important impact on them. Tell everyone nearby to retreat and report the situation here to the Uruk. I'll hold off the magical beasts here for the time being. Ishtar was like a heroine, valiantly giving orders to the people. Yes, Lady Ishtar. We'll follow your orders. After kneeling and thanking Ishtar, the people quickly left the area, called the nearby humans, and moved toward the Uruk. Chapter 953. At this moment, Ishtar, who noticed that everyone had left, was elated. Yes. I've wanted to say this for a long time. Acting cool is indeed the best. My prestige has been spread once again. At this moment, Ishtar seemed a little unreliable. However, Ishtar was not arrogant enough to think that she could eliminate all the demonic beasts in the Persian Gulf with a reduced version of her relic. Ishtar turned her head to look at the Persian Gulf. The smoke from the explosion gradually dispersed. As expected, there were still many kururu in the sky above the Persian Gulf. These were not the kururu that Ishtar had hit. Those kururu that were hit by Ishtar had fallen into the water. It was unknown whether they were dead or alive. These were the kururu that took the opportunity to fly up after the explosion. Hiss! The kururu, who were obviously mermaids, made a snake-like sound and rushed towards Ishtar. Whoosh! A ray of light shot out from the launch port of Tianzhou's horse Anna and directly hit the kururu at the front. The power of the light directly blew the kururu into pieces and even affected the surrounding kururu. Ishtar kept his left arm pointing straight forward and his right hand under his left elbow. A smile appeared on his face. It was a beautiful smile full of confidence. Anyone who saw this scene would be captivated by Ishtar's smile at this moment. Unfortunately, only the unromantic and extremely ugly kururu could see this scene. Demonic beasts were originally beasts. Since they were beasts, they should appear in the form of beasts. However, these mermaids had a similar body shape to humans. To put it simply, they were demonic beasts that had the appearance of humans. This caused these mermaids to look extremely ugly. Their long cheeks spread out from both sides of their faces and their mouths were filled with shark-like teeth. Their heads, shoulders, arms, elbows, and spines were filled with a single saw-like fin. It was as if they were born to kill. Even the webbing between their claws had become extremely sharp and could be used as thin and transparent blades. What looked like a female's chest was actually two lumps of pectoral fins that were curled together. There was also a tail that was like a cape on its waist. Further down, its lower body was completely a thick fish tail. Its skin was covered with greenish-brown scales. Its blood-red eyes were filled with killing intent and hatred towards humans. This was the same gaze as other demonic beasts. Although I was forced by that bastard Hyunryong, since I'm here, I naturally have no reason to let you go. Be prepared. In the next second, countless rays of light like curved bullets flew towards the group of Kururu demonic beasts that were rushing towards Ishtar. An explosion suddenly occurred. However, Ishtar, who was bombarding the winged Kururu in the sky, did not notice that in the depths of the Persian Gulf, there was a scarlet eye that was different from the other Kururu demonic beasts. It was quietly watching this scene. On the north wall, Leonidas had also finished listening to Wu Ming's explanation. I see. You thought that demonic beasts would appear in the Persian Gulf, so you sent Lady Ishtar there. This was indeed possible. Leonidas might not know, but Wu Ming had already learned the intentions of the demonic beasts from Merlin. They were preparing to attack the Uruk from all directions. The demonic beasts' commanders did not know that Merlin had used Ulidim as a tool to collect information, so their plan was likely to proceed as usual. Although there was a defense in the Persian Gulf, the defense there was basically prepared to deal with the Kururu that might exist in the Euphrates and Tigris rivers. The Persian Gulf in the southeast could be said to be safer than the North Wall, the South Jungle, the Western Mountains, and even the Northeastern Mountains. After all, it was adjacent to the Indian Ocean, and the demonic beasts could not pass through the surrounding areas to reach there. The only danger was the Kururu that came from the Euphrates and Tigris rivers. However, the Kururu could not go ashore. In a sense, this was not a danger in the case of proper defense. Not to mention, Gilgamesh had sent people to hunt down the Kururu in the river and the Persian Gulf. Although Gilgamesh knew that there were Kururu demonic beasts in the river and the Persian Gulf, he had no way to deal with them. After all, as long as the Kururu escaped to the bottom of the river or sneaked into the Persian Gulf, humans would not be able to do anything to these demonic beasts. However, with Zhuge Kongming's stone formation covering most of the Uruk, there would be no new Kururu entering the Persian Gulf through the Euphrates and Tigris rivers. Therefore, as long as the river was well defended and targeted at the remaining Kururu in the Persian Gulf, the area around the Persian Gulf was basically safer than the Uruk. No matter how one looked at it, it was foolproof. However, Wu Ming did not think so. Now, there was no place that was absolutely safe in the Uruk. The safer the place, the more likely it was to be dangerous. The Uruk was in the center, but it was still attacked by one of the demonic beast commanders, Mu Xiu and Hu Xiu. The Persian Gulf was only far from the north wall, so it could not be classified as safe. Therefore, Wu Ming asked Ishtar to go to the Persian Gulf to see the situation. If there were no demonic beasts, Ishtar would directly come to the north wall for support. However, if there were demonic beasts, Ishtar would be responsible for eliminating them. With the Bull of Heaven, Ishtar would not be afraid even if she faced a demonic beast commander. No, meeting a demonic beast commander was what Wu Ming wanted. Because this way, he could take advantage of this opportunity to eliminate another demonic beast commander. But this is also good. If there are demonic beasts there and no one to deal with them, the Uruk and even the entire Mesopotamia may be completely finished. If a large number of demonic beasts or even demonic beast commanders appeared in the Persian Gulf, whether it was the North Wall or the Quetzalcoatl in the southern jungle, they would not be able to provide support to the Persian Gulf. Needless to say, the southern jungle would have already started fighting with the demonic beasts. As for the North Wall, they would probably have already started fighting with the demonic beast. For the same reason, there would be no way to send reinforcements. Just as Leonidas was sighing, Wu Ming noticed that Ishtar's magical power was being drained by a large amount from the contract he signed with Ishtar. It seemed that Wu Ming was right. Demonic beasts had appeared in the Persian Gulf, and there were a lot of them. Otherwise, Ishtar would not have to spend so much effort. It seems that Ishtar has already started fighting with the demonic beasts. I can feel that she is using a lot of magical power from the contract. Leonidas could not help but feel excited. It seems that you are right, Sir Hyunryong. But just as Leonidas was in awe again, the ancient clock hanging high up on the northern wall rang out crisp and incessant. Dang, 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 dang. As the clock rang, the soldiers on the north wall who were on alert shouted, "The demonic beasts are coming!" Chapter 954. Sir Hyunryong, I'll take my leave first, Leonidas said in a hurry. Then, 2 streams of mana gathered in Leonidas's hands and turned into a heavy spear and a small metal shield. Leonidas then walked towards the north wall. The sound of the bell was still rippling. The sound of the bell spread from here to the other parts of the north wall. For a time, the people of the north wall were mobilized. Wuming flew up into the sky and let Collis project the situation of the north wall in front of him. Wuming could now see the situation of the north wall. Wuming wanted to see how the humans were relying on the north wall to defend against the magical beast. Everyone at the north wall moved. The soldiers were fully armed and ready to fight. The logistics personnel stopped what they were doing and put the things in their hands in the corner to avoid affecting the soldiers' movements. Then, the logistics personnel retreated to a safe area. On the north wall, the soldiers were ready with bows and arrows. But for some reason, they were hidden in the battlements of the north wall. On the ground, the experienced soldiers were holding spears and shields. They came to a barricade about 10 meters in front of the north wall and waited for the arrival of the magical beast. These barricades were made of thick wood. They were specially placed in front of the north wall to defend against the magical beast. After all, they couldn't really use the wall to defend against the magical beasts every time they attacked. If the attackers were humans, they wouldn't have to set up a barricade about 10 meters in front of the north wall. This was because humans weren't like the magical beasts, who were full of weapons and full of aggressiveness. If the magical beasts were left alone, they would attack the north wall. The sheer number of magical beasts was enough to cause damage to the north wall that couldn't be repaired in time. Therefore, a barricade about 10 meters in front of the north wall was set up as a new layer of insurance. The barricade could let the soldiers' spears pass through. If the magical beasts hit the barricade, they would definitely die. Therefore, the magical beasts could only jump over the barricade. Like now. The mass-produced Ulidim and Ujar rushed to the barricade in front of the north wall because of their mobility. The long spears seemed to be waiting for the right moment, and when the magic beasts were about to reach them, they instantly shot out from the gaps in the fence. However, at this moment, the distance between the magic beast and the fence was enough for it to react. The only thing it could do was to jump over the fence that wasn't that high. However, when the magical beast jumped into the air, spears sprang up like bamboo shoots after a rain, and the spears suddenly grew out, and their positions were exactly where the magical beast was falling, sentencing the magical beast to death before it even landed on the ground. This was a tactic used by humans to deal with brainless magical beasts. One after another, the magical beasts repeated the same actions, constantly sending themselves to their deaths. Although the humans were having a harder time, they had the advantage of not suffering any casualties. However, there would always be casualties in war. There was no war without casualties, unless the time was not right. Just like now. A large number of four-legged lizard-like Musu and Hushio arrived at the front line. Due to their short legs, they were much slower than Ujar and Ulidim. However, their bodies were covered in thick scales. They could easily withstand the spears sticking out of the fence and attack the fence. Immediately after, a red, short, and thin three-headed snake darted out from Mu Xiu and Hu Xiu's body, slithering through the gaps in the fence where the humans had placed their spears. Its spring-like body directly bit towards the human's throat. These short, slender three-headed snakes were none other than the mass-produced magical beasts that had followed the mass-produced magical beasts to attack the temporary stronghold in the northeast, Musu Maf. However, many of the soldiers present had been through hundreds of battles, especially the soldiers at the front. They were all veterans who had lived for half a year. Although the humans did not come up with an effective plan to deal with Musu Maf, the soldiers had figured out the characteristics of these short and thin Musu Maf. After they were ejected, they would be in a state of pause for a short while, as if the ejection had used up almost all the strength in their short and slender bodies. Taking advantage of this opportunity, the soldiers could use the spears in their hands or the swords at their waists to kill them. However, even an old horse would stumble sometimes. Due to fatigue, distraction, and various other reasons, some of the soldiers did not react in time and were bitten in the throat by the three-headed snake. They instantly collapsed to the ground as if they had lost all their strength. Blood gushed out like a fountain. But in the next second, the three-headed snakes that had bitten the soldiers were pierced by spears and 3 of their heads were chopped off. This was done by the soldiers behind the soldiers who had fallen to the ground. The soldiers in the second row were all veterans. No one gave any orders. When the soldiers at the front were injured or killed, the soldiers at the back had to replace them. If there were any magical beasts, they had to kill them. This was the result of the tacit understanding between the humans after fighting against the magical beasts for half a year. However, because the number of Musu Maphis was much more than what they had encountered in the past, the soldiers who had never experienced such a situation gradually felt uneasy. More and more soldiers were killed by the Musu Maf's sneak attacks. The Musu Maf also became faster and more powerful as they crashed into the fence. Moreover, due to the large number of Musu Maf, the formation of the human soldiers was disrupted. Many of the Ujers and Ulidim stepped on the back of the Musu Maf and jumped over the fence to reach the area between the northern wall and the fence. For a moment, the area in front of the northern wall that had been attacked by the magical beasts was filled with such scenes. Looking at this scene, Wu Ming furrowed his brows. However, he did not choose to take action. Instead, he continued to observe the situation quietly. Firstly, the commander of the magical beasts must be somewhere watching this scene. Wu Ming did not need to deal with the magical beasts in front of him. Instead, he needed to deal with the magical beast commanders that could not be replicated and posed a fatal threat to the humans. Secondly, if the humans needed the help of the gods, just because of this level of attack, Wu Ming would be very suspicious of how the northern wall had lasted for half a year. Humans were existences with endless possibilities. How could they be captured just because of an attack of this level? Sure enough, in the next moment, the humans began to counterattack. Bang, 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 3 metallic sounds echoed throughout the northern wall. Wu Ming focused his gaze and saw that it was Leonidas who had climbed up the northern wall and was knocking on his shield. When the soldiers heard the 3 knocks, they didn't hesitate to retreat back into the north wall. Naturally, the magical beasts would not give up such an opportunity and began to pursue. However, in the next second, they were greeted with a rain of arrows. Chapter 955. Countless magical beasts that charged forward were covered by the rain of arrows. The larger Ulidim and Wujer were covered in arrows and couldn't be more dead. Although Mu Xiu Hu Xiu had scales on its back, it wasn't indestructible. Its eyes, joints, and other weak points were its weak points. Under the rain of arrows, these weak points were naturally hit. The short and thin 3-headed snakes weren't spared either. After being ejected, they temporarily lost their ability to hide and could only wait for death. Only the Musu Mafu that hadn't escaped from Mu Xiu Hu Xiu's scales were lucky enough to escape. However, there were only a few of them left and they couldn't do much. In an instant, the attacking magical beasts were all killed. Wu Ming couldn't help but nod his head at this scene. The rain of arrows was shot by the archers hidden in the battlements of the northern wall. Now Wu Ming had completely figured out the hidden purpose of those archers. When the magical beasts attacked, the archers hid and didn't come out. It was obvious that their mission was to cover the soldiers who were fighting on the ground. When the soldiers couldn't hold on and retreated, the archers would shoot thousands of arrows and stop the magical beasts. At the same time, they would become the temporary main force and kill all the magical beasts that entered their shooting range. Moreover, because the humans retreated into the northern wall after Leonidas knocked on the shield 3 times, the archers didn't have to worry anymore and directly shot at the magical beast. However, there were still a large number of magical beasts that flocked towards them from afar as though the rain of arrows was nothing. That was indeed the case. After all, the archers didn't have unlimited arrows. The scene of thousands of arrows being shot at the same time was only because they had enough arrows at the beginning. Gradually, the archers' arrows were used up. As though they had foreseen this scene, more and more magical beasts rushed towards the northern wall. However, Wu Ming saw a few divine power seals, Dinger, on the northern wall moving. It was not the Dinger that Zhuge Kongming had modified. It was just an ordinary Dinger. However, no matter how ordinary the Dinger was, it was still a powerful weapon. As if it was turned on, the Dinger made a clicking sound. The barrel rose and lengthened a lot because of the extension. The sharp cone-shaped muzzle was aimed at the sky at a certain angle. The safety at the back of the barrel was opened, and the Dinger was ready to fire. The archers were still sniping at the small number of magical beasts below the northern wall, while the Dinger was aimed at a large wave of magical beasts not far away. Dinger, fire! Following Leonidas' furious roar, the order to launch the Dinger was transmitted to the person in charge of the launch. In an instant, the rain of light that started from the center of the northern wall flew into the sky. Then, the rain of light, which was free falling due to gravity, directly hit the second wave of magical beasts as if it had predicted the attack. Asterisk boom! Asterisk, although it wasn't as big as the mushroom cloud, it was still a spectacular explosion in the wilderness north of the northern wall. The second wave of magical beasts was almost completely annihilated. Then, several gates on the northern wall were opened again. Many logisticians and even soldiers came out from the gate. The soldiers went straight to the magical beasts that had escaped the net. Wu Ming thought that the logisticians would deal with the few human corpses, but instead, they collected the arrows shot by the archers. I see. This is a very thorough plan and cooperation. Wu Ming nodded and expressed his approval once again. First, the ground troops would contain the magical beasts, then the magical beasts would retreat when they broke through. Then, the long-range troops would harvest the nearby magical beasts. Finally, the Dinger would be used to finish off the magical beast. Then, the Dinger would be used to send people to collect the arrows while the magical beasts couldn't rush over. It had to be said that this was a complete and extremely effective plan. A large number of magical beasts had been killed or injured, and although the human side had also sacrificed themselves, in terms of numbers, even if they could not be compared to the magical beasts, it was still an extremely small number. Before the next wave of magical beasts arrived, Wu Ming flew to the top of the wall and found Leonidas. Very good defense, Leonidas. I even suspect that if the hot spring gate had given you a more suitable geographical location, you would have been able to stop the Persian army with only 30 people. You're exaggerating, Sir Hyunryong. Leonidas knew that Wu Ming was just being polite. After all, Leonidas didn't think that he could stop the Persian army with only 30 people. When he tried to stop the Persian army with only 300 people, he also didn't have the confidence. But now, sage King Gilgamesh provided Leonidas with excellent geographical and human conditions. Whether it was the North Wall or the Uruk soldiers, they played a key role in protecting the North Wall from being breached for half a year. It was like a big gear and a small gear that played a key role, and Leonidas was just the oil between the gears. By the way, what's so special about those arrows? Wu Ming suddenly asked. Sure enough, you found it, Leonidas said with relief. How could Wu Ming not find it? He didn't care about the bodies of the dead soldiers but collected the arrows first. Not to mention other things, the North Wall had the support of the Uruk, so how could there be a shortage of arrows? It was really strange. Moreover, even if there was a shortage of arrows, there was no need to be so anxious. It was obvious that he had overdone it. Unless there was a special effect on those arrows. Previously, when thousands of arrows were shot, the magic beasts were easily killed. Although they still couldn't hurt Mu Xiu and Hu Xiu, who were covered in scales, the dense arrows were still able to hurt them. Their eyes, joints and other fragile parts of their bodies were still damaged. Mu Xiu and Hu Xiu were also enhanced magic beasts, so they were easily killed. Therefore, there was an 80% to 90% chance that there was a problem with those arrows. As expected of Lord Sage Dragon. It's just as I've guessed. These arrows are special. They've all been enchanted by Lord Strategist. They're special arrows that are effective against magic beasts. The magic beasts had been enhanced 3 months ago. When facing magic beasts like Mu Xiu, Hu Xiu and Wugger, ordinary arrows couldn't completely pierce their bodies. If the arrows were ineffective, it meant that humans would lose their long-range attack. Without long-range attacks, it would be impossible for humans to compete with the beasts. At that time, the military counselor knew about this and began to modify the arrows. Chapter 956. Since he still had some free time, Leonidas started explaining to Wu Ming. However, the ordinary arrows used by the soldiers have to be modified into enchanted arrows that can pierce through the beast. It's troublesome and the cost isn't low. So the military advisor gave up on the idea of time-consuming and laborious. Instead, he enchanted the arrows to achieve the effect of piercing through the beast. As long as the arrows could pierce through the beasts, then everything would be fine. As for the problem of not dealing enough damage, Leonidas didn't think about it. After all, the soldiers relied on quantity to shoot arrows. As long as they could break through the defense of the demonic beasts and pierce the arrows into their bodies, then everything would be fine. The current scene was the best proof of that. Once again, Wu Ming looked at Zhuge Kongming with new eyes. Sure enough, Zhuge Kongming didn't stay idle after being summoned. He did a lot of things. However, even if it's just a light enchantment on the arrows, it's still not a small task for the military counselor. Although the military counselor modifies some of the arrows every day, in order to avoid wastage, we always collect the arrows after fighting against the magical beast. In any case, the demonic beasts would not react to the arrows. They would neither attack nor use the arrows. Therefore, every time the demonic beasts attacked, the logisticians would retrieve the arrows while the soldiers would rest. After all, fighting against the demonic beasts would cause a lot of physical and mental fatigue. But when the number of beasts was too high, the seal of divinity, Dinger, would be needed. When the number of beasts was too high, the soldiers would listen to Leonidas' orders and return to the north wall. Afterwards, the soldiers on the north wall would use the seal of divinity, Dinger, to aim at the beasts in the distance and bombard them. As for the nearby magical beasts, they were left to the archers to deal with. Alternatively, they would send melee soldiers to attack them in groups, relying on numbers to kill a single magical beast nearby. It was ironic that the beasts who had the advantage in numbers were killed by the humans. After that, the seal of divinity, Dinger, would block the beasts and create a gap in their attack. The logistics personnel and soldiers had the opportunity to collect the arrows. At the beginning of the implementation of this strategy, the humans frequently made mistakes. After all, there were a lot of uncertainties in the strategy. For example, the speed of the beasts, where the seal of divinity, Dinger, shells should be fired to effectively block the beast's movement. There was also a series of problems that the logistics personnel couldn't efficiently collect the arrows due to the high frequency of the beast's attacks. In the end, Zhuge Kongming, as the military advisor, and Leonidas, who was in charge of the front lines, came up with an effective plan. Gilgamesh looked at it and made some changes, and this set of plans to deal with the magical beasts was settled. Moreover, because the logisticians had a recycling tool that King Gilgamesh had given them from his own treasury, the speed at which they collected the arrows wasn't slow. After Gilgamesh saw the report, he took the initiative to give the logistics personnel the tools that had the effect of collecting the arrows from his treasury. Although it's not as efficient as this king's treasury, these tools are enough for you. It will probably increase your efficiency by a few times. Go and fight the beasts for this king with gratitude. These were Gilgamesh's original words. However, the morale of the soldiers rose one by one. It had to be said that after Gilgamesh gave the tools from his treasury to the front line, it did indeed increase the efficiency of the logistics personnel in collecting the arrows. This was much more reliable than simply using the treasures as artillery shells. Standing on the north wall, Wu Ming looked outside. Sure enough, the logistics personnel without weapons were all carrying square boxes. They were quickly moving between the piles of arrows and the corpses of the beasts on the ground. Whenever the logistics personnel who were collecting the arrows got close to the piles of arrows, the arrows on the ground and the corpses of the beasts would automatically be collected into the boxes on their back. There are some good things in Gilgamesh's treasury. No wonder Ishtar has been coveting it. Wu Ming didn't know what was in Gilgamesh's treasury. After all, the treasury didn't belong to him. He didn't need to care about what was in it. But now that he looked at it, there were some useful things in Gilgamesh's treasury. Now that he thought about it, Wu Ming regretted that he didn't take anything from Gilgamesh's treasury when he left Uruk. The items in his dragon's nest dimension were almost used up. The number of tools that he took from Nasrik's treasury had also decreased to the point where he could see them all at a glance. Last time, he didn't take anything from Gil. This time, should he take something from Gil? Wu Ming was a little conflicted. But he had to wait until everything was over before thinking about it. Right now, he had to focus on the beast. Bang, bang, bang. Another 3 metal collision sounds were heard. This time, Wu Ming could hear it clearly, because the one who made the sound was Leonidas, who was standing beside Wu Ming. As if it was a signal, the soldiers and logistics personnel outside the north wall stopped their movements. They didn't care about the enchanted arrows on the ground or the corpses of the beasts. They turned and retreated towards the north wall, because the beasts were coming again. The smoke caused by the dinger gradually dissipated. Countless beasts were rushing towards the north wall. The number of beasts was several times more than the total number of beasts that attacked before. Looking at this scene, Wu Ming couldn't help but frown. This wasn't a good sign. The attack of the magical beasts this time, regardless of whether it was the frequency or the number, made Wu Ming shocked. There were still a lot of enchanted arrows outside the north wall. If the beasts attacked like this every time, then it was only a matter of time before the north wall was broken. But if there was a beast commander, then the north wall would be broken in an instant. Seeing so many magical beasts, Leonidas decided not to let the soldiers shoot at them with their arrows. Dinger ready! He directly ordered the soldiers to use the dinger. It was simple and crude. Fire! Along with Leonidas' order, dozens of dinger on the north wall once again fired bullets filled with magic power. Boom! 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 One after another, explosions broke out in the field outside the north wall. Because of the explosions, a cloud appeared in the eyes of the people on the north wall. This was a scene full of art if one ignored the beasts. Chapter 957. Leonidas and Wu Ming walked down the north wall. The demons had been bombarded by the dinger on the north wall, so they had retreated and stopped attacking. After all, the dinger was a real, mystical weapon. Even if the demons were strengthened, they would not be able to withstand it unless the demon's commander came in person. Because of this, the soldiers were able to rest for a while. Wu Ming and Leonida also had the opportunity to retreat from the north wall. This was because Wu Ming had something to discuss with Leonida. In Leonida's tent, Leonida sat on his own seat while Wu Ming sat on the seat next to him. The seating arrangement was requested by Wu Ming. He didn't put on airs, so Leonida could sit wherever he wanted. Leonidas, who had already taken off his helmet, revealed a resolute face. With his red hair, he indeed looked like a Spartan. Leonida picked up the clay jug next to him and aimed it at his mouth. He gulped down the water inside and let out a heroic sound that would make people with OCD feel very comfortable. Ah! Awesome! Leonida slammed the clay jug on the table in front of him. He looked like he was drunk as he looked at Wu Ming. So, Hyunryong-sama, why are you looking for me alone? Leonida's voice was full of drunkenness. This gave Wu Ming the feeling that Leonida was really drunk. Mesopotamia was famous for ale. When Wu Ming first came to the Uruk, he was worshipped with ale. It wasn't good, but it wasn't bad either. It was just average, but as long as it was wine, it could make people drunk. Even dead spirits could get drunk. Even their avatars could get drunk. To be honest, if Wu Ming didn't know that there was no wine in the North Wall, Wu Ming would have thought that Leonida was drinking in the barrack. Rumor had it that Leonidas could get drunk with just a drop of alcohol and go on a drunken rampage. Cough cough. At this moment, Wu Ming also became serious. I'm going to Nippur. When Wu Ming said this, the slightly drunk Leonida's face was no longer red. His expression also became serious. He took the clay jug off the table and put it aside. Leonida put his hands on the small table in front of him and looked at Wu Ming with a serious expression. Is that the gathering place of the magical beasts? Although it was in the form of a question, his tone was a statement. After all, Wu Ming had told him this information when he came to the North Wall. After that, without waiting for Wu Ming to answer him, Leonidas once again fell into a drunken stupor and started talking to himself. About 3 months ago, when the magical beast commander appeared with the strengthened magical beasts, the North Wall had already been built. Outside the North Wall, there were still a lot of people left in Nippur. They were all trying to resist the magical beast. In order to survive, they were full of hope and were waiting for our rescue. Leonida grabbed the clay jug that was just put down next to him. He took a big gulp of water and continued to speak. As a result, on the night of the appearance of the magical beast commander, the Uruk was attacked. Since then, we haven't received any news from Nippur. It was obvious that the city gates of Nippur had been broken open by the strengthened demons and their demon's commander, and had fallen completely. A mere city was not enough in front of the magical beast commander. Nippur was outside the North Wall. If it was the current magical beasts, it would be difficult for them to resist, not to mention the existence of the magical beast commander. Wu Ming didn't have the intention to talk about this topic. He just quietly listened to Leonida's narration. When Leonida was almost done, Wu Ming began to talk. I don't know if there are other places that have become the strongholds of the magical beasts other than Nippur. I'm going to go outside the North Wall to check if there are any living humans and destroy the magical beast's lair. Wu Ming's last words could be considered as a response to Leonida's condolences for Nippur. Is that so? Although Leonidas thought that this method was dangerous, he didn't say anything. Wu Ming only came to inform Leonidas about it. After all, Wu Ming was not his subordinate at all. The two of them were not even on the same level. Leonidas' status in Mesopotamia was much lower than Wu Ming's. After all, Wu Ming was the Hyunryong of Mesopotamia. Don't worry, I'm also a god-level servant. If I can't beat them, I can still run. If it were you, I'm afraid you would be buried in the magical beast. Wu Ming's comforting words were like sarcasm, causing Leonidas's Spartan face to twitch involuntarily. However, what Wu Ming said was indeed true. If Wu Ming was there during the beheading operation, perhaps a few more servants would have survived. In that case, I won't say anything. At that moment, Leonidas stood up and picked up the clay jar on the ground. During the time when you are not in the North Wall, I will guard the North Wall. With that, Leonidas boldly drank the entire jar of water. This made Wu Ming feel rather helpless, but Wu Ming had to do something right now, didn't he? Then I'll leave it to you, General Leonida. Wu Ming picked up a bottle of water beside him and drank it without hesitation. He was no weaker than Leonidas. Then, I'll leave first. Putting down the clay jar in his hand, Wu Ming did not say goodbye to Leonida and went straight out of the tent. When Leonida rushed out, he found that he couldn't find Wu Ming. At this moment, in the sky outside the north wall, Wu Ming, who relied on telekinesis to fly in the sky, headed in the direction of Nippur in his memory. He also asked Kalas to help him detect the movements of the demonic beasts so that he could avoid them and go directly to Nippur. If it was only to detect the magic reaction on the surrounding ground, Kalas could do it. Although Wu Ming and Leonida said that they were going to see if there were any living people around, in fact, the hope of living people was directly impossible. This point, whether it was Leonida or Wu Ming, they were very clear about. However, seeing through but not saying it out was more or less the same meaning. When the time comes, I will directly kill all the demonic beasts. It can be regarded as revenge for the people in Nippur and even the entire Mesopotamia, who were sacrificed by the demonic beast. With this in mind, Wu Ming accelerated again, and soon Wu Ming saw the shadow of Nippur. Before directly approaching Nippur, Wu Ming smelled the stench of demonic beasts and the demonic beasts that were active in Nippur. From the sky, Wu Ming could faintly see that there were red marks on the ground and walls of Nippur, and there were a lot of them. It was blood. Sure enough, it's better to directly destroy Nippur. As a god, he should also do something that was in line with God destroying a city. Chapter 958. Wu Ming didn't have any hope for the survivors, that was for sure. But what was contradictory was that Wu Ming still had hope for the survivors. A certain righteous hero once said that when people say impossible, there must be a glimmer of hope in their heart. Although Wu Ming wasn't human, he also had the same thought. So when Wu Ming saw the scene in Nippur, Wu Ming was filled with anger. There were too many red bloodstains around Nippur city, so much that it was enough to prove that there were no living people in Nippur city. Moreover, these bloodstains all indicated that what the citizens of Nippur city had experienced was a terrifying massacre brought about by magical beasts. So Wu Ming didn't want to go down to investigate the situation. Instead, he prepared to launch an attack. When the hope in a person's heart was destroyed, who wouldn't be angry? Wu Ming would be angry, but it was useless. Annihilating Nippur was the only way to save Nippur. Wu Ming believed that if the patron saint of Nippur, Enlil, was here, he would agree with Wu Ming's idea. Wu Ming waved his hand and golden ripples suddenly emerged from Wu Ming's side. A bright white holy spear was spat out from it. This was the holy spear that Wu Ming had obtained in the country of shadows. It was made from the core branch of the world tree. Although it wasn't comparable to King Arthur's holy spear, Luangaminyad, it represented a part of the Nordic world tree, so its status wasn't low. Although it had merged and separated from Funbaba, this spear had gone through the baptism of its origin with Wu Ming. It was no longer the same as before. Holding Yggdrasil in a reverse grip, Wu Ming raised it behind his back and pointed the tip of the spear at Nippur city diagonally below. Wu Ming began to instill magic into Yggdrasil. Wu Ming was ready to destroy Nippur completely with one attack. Kalas, correct the target and gather the mana. Yes, master. Under Wu Ming's command, Kalas, who was in a supporting magic attire, left. A few magic arrays suddenly appeared around Wu Ming and slowly gathered on Yggdrasil. The magic array could allow Wu Ming to aim at the center of Nippur more accurately. It could also gather Wu Ming's mana to prevent the mana from leaking midway, making Yggdrasil more powerful. Noble Fantas dash in an instant, the mana in Wu Ming's body surged like a boiling ocean. Countless mana materialized and gathered on Yggdrasil in Wu Ming's hand like a decorative ribbon dancing on the spear's body. Liberated dash, Yggdrasil seemed to have been stimulated. The shape of the tip and the end of the spear changed. Not only did it become longer and thicker, but it also became more sacred. Diagonally below, the magical beasts in Nippur, whether indoors or outdoors, all raised their heads in horror and looked in the direction of the huge manna in the sky. Their beastly instincts told them that they would probably die soon, the kind where not even dregs would be left. Yggdrasil! Wuming's eyes suddenly turned golden, and he threw Yggdrasil like a javelin. Wuming himself rose a lot because of the strong impact of Yggdrasil. The body of the Yggdrasil spear was surrounded by several auxiliary magic arrays. The colorful ribbons formed by magic power fluttered behind the end of the Yggdrasil spear. It was like a beautiful comet that was about to fall to the ground, and flew straight towards Nippur. As long as one had a discerning eye, they would be able to tell that this comet was flying towards the city center of Nippur. It seemed like it was going to hit the center of Nippur and destroy Nippur. Roar! Countless magical beasts reacted and immediately began to run for their lives. They roared in fear as if they were panicking like the citizens of Nippur. However, the comet did not have any compassion for the magical beasts and still brought God's punishment over. At this moment the ground shook. 10 huge ferocious snake heads suddenly broke out of the ground and aimed at the comet formed by Yggdrasil. These 10 snake heads shot out purple rays. In the southwest of Mesopotamia, in the tropical rainforest formed by the authority of the feathered god, countless red magical beasts rioted in the rainforest. The magical beasts shuttled through the rainforest and constantly rubbed against the vegetation of the rainforest, causing the rainforest to rustle as if a storm was coming. Roar! These magical beasts were covered with thick and short red hair. They had no eyes, and there were some tumor-like hair where the eyes were and the back of their heads. Their tails were raised high as if they relied on their tails to search for enemies. The teeth of these magical beasts were not sharp. It was enough to tell that they did not use their teeth to bite their prey. Instead, they used their thick claws to tear their enemies apart. There were traces of flames on their claws, as if they were about to burn. This was the magical beast Uxiemughal. It was a type of magical beast that was different from Ujiel and Ulidim. However, Uxiemughal was not the only magical beast in the rainforest. There were also some carnivorous orcs with leopard heads, wolf heads, and dog head. Roar! The orcs wielded weapons like clubs and fought fearlessly against the magical beasts that swarmed in. Although they were not as large as the strengthened magical beasts, this rainforest was their territory. They were more familiar with this place than the magical beasts. Using the geographical advantage, the orcs were able to hold their ground. They were evenly matched with the magical beasts. However, even with the perfect geographical advantage, they still couldn't beat the human advantage. Although the orcs relied on their familiarity with the terrain to contend with the magical beasts, there were simply too many magical beasts, which caused the orcs to keep retreating. If this continued, it was only a matter of time before the orcs were forced to retreat to a dead end. Of course, there was another possibility, and that was if the magical beast commander personally took action. That would be much faster. Like now. Roar, roar, roar! A roar that was even more majestic than the roar of ordinary magic beasts came from afar. The orcs could only see rows of rainforest trees falling one after another. The earth was still shaking as if some terrifying tyrant had rushed to the battlefield. Sure enough, in the next second, a huge Uxiemughal that looked similar to the other Uxiemughal but was so huge that it struck fear in the orcs appeared in front of the orcs. However, there was one difference. This huge Uxiemughal had 3 sharp horns on its head, making the huge Uxiemughal, which looked like a lion, look like a triceratops. The orcs felt the enormous magic power of this gigantic Uxiemughal and came to a conclusion without a doubt. This was the prototype of the mass-produced Uxiemughal, one of the rare beast-type Uxiemughal commanders. Roar, roar, roar! The prototype Uxiemughal roared again. This roar was mixed with a large amount of mana, and countless orcs who were close by fainted from this roar. Not only that, but the surrounding trees also collapsed one after another, forming an open space full of fallen trees. It made the entire rainforest look much more spacious and bright. Simply put, the roar of the prototype Uxie could be understood as the release of magical power sound. The roar full of magical power pushed down the orcs and the surrounding trees. Countless Uxie took this opportunity to pass by the orcs and rushed into the depths of the forest. This was the intention of the prototype Uxie. Their enemy was not the orcs, but the commander of the orcs' commanders. That was the master of this rainforest, the feathered serpent god Quetzalcoatl. Roar! A roar like that of both a tiger and a leopard came from the depths of the rainforest. Countless magical beasts trembled and froze on the ground after hearing it. This was the innate suppression of wild beasts. The fear of wild beasts meeting more powerful wild beasts was engraved in their DNA. The Uxie knew that the roar came from an existence superior to them, so they did not dare to move forward. It had to be said that this was an interesting matter. No matter what, humans could not stop the attacks of the magical beasts, but a beast that was higher in level than the magical beasts could stop them in their tracks. It could only be said that it was really interesting. The prototype Uxie was not surprised at all. Its big head shook at the surrounding Uxie who had stopped. Although it did not have eyes, it gave people the feeling that it was examining these mass-produced Uxie. Then, the prototype Uxie let out a strange roar, as if it was rather disdainful of these mass-produced magical beasts. After all, this was not the first time it had encountered such a situation. It had led these mass-produced magical beasts to raid the rainforest several times before. Almost every time, these mass-produced Uxie would be frightened by the roar that sounded like both a tiger and a leopard. Although it could force these mass-produced Uxie to move again, as the original Uxie really didn't want to see them in such a useless state anymore. At that moment, it no longer cared about these mass-produced creatures. Anyway, it could deal with the existence that let out that sound like both a tiger and a leopard by itself, so it might as well say that it had fought with the other party several times already. Just as the prototype Uxie was pondering, a yellow-striped humanoid creature suddenly jumped from the trees in the dense forest towards the prototype Uxie. The toy-like claw spear in its hand flashed dangerously as it viciously stabbed at the prototype Uxie. Roar! As the prototype Uxie roared, the claw spear that flashed dangerously did not hit the Uxie body. Instead, it hit the three horns on the Uxie head. Clang! The sound of clashing steel resounded in the surroundings, causing the mass-produced Uxie, who were originally frightened, to collectively tremble. They slowly and carefully retreated, as if they were giving way to the leopard man and the prototype Uxie to fight. That's right, the one who let out that sound like both a tiger and a leopard was the leopard man, who was dressed strangely and looked like a cosplay. She was also the commander of those orcs, and the feathered serpent god Quetzalcoatl was her commander. However, the claw spear that was violently rubbing against the three horns of the prototype Uxie showed that the leopard man was not just a figurehead. It showed that she had god-level strength, and was comparable to Tiamat's direct descendant, the 11 Sons, one of the commanders of the magical beasts, Uxie. But at this moment Uxie let out a mocking sound, which made the leopard man, who was close by, rather angry. Damn it! The leopard man roared in despair, then immediately used the reaction force of Uxie to jump back to the rainforest in the distance where there were still trees. Then, the leopard man hung the claw spear in her hand on a book, opened her hands and placed them on her cheeks, and shouted at the sky. "Cooker! I can't beat it! Come and help me!" That's right, the leopard man was actually unable to beat Uxie. They seemed to be evenly matched, but that was only because Uxie was not serious. In fact, when Wuming returned, Uxie had been here for a long time. At that time, one of the commanders of the magical beasts, Ulidim, had actually come to support Uxie-Umugel, not to attack. When Wuming and Gadotsi came to the southern jungle, the reason why they did not see Quizard-Coatl was because Quizard-Coatl was busy dealing with Uxie-Umugel. The reason why the leopard man, who had led the way for Gadotsi and the others, left after bringing Gadotsi and the others here was because he needed to help Quizard-Coatl deal with Uxie-Umugel. As for telling Gadotsi and the others? Don't even think about it. Although the leopard man was not stupid, the leopard man's brain circuit was different from ordinary people and even ordinary servants. It was very similar to those berserkers. It was already good enough that she could go back to support Quizard-Coatl. It was basically impossible to expect her to report the information. If Wuming was there at that time, maybe she could ask. Unfortunately, Wuming was not there at that time. When Wuming and Gadotsi met up, the leopard man had already left. Moreover, because Uxie-Umugel, one of the commanders of the magical beasts, attacked the southwest part of the jungle, which was quite a distance away from Wuming and Gadotsi. So, whether it was Wuming or Chaldea, they did not notice that Uxie-Umugel, one of the commanders of the magical beasts, was constantly attacking the jungle. At that time, the information that Merlin had obtained from Ulidim's mind was incomplete. As a result, the original Uxie-Umugel, one of the commanders of the magic beasts, had been staying near the southwest part of the southern forest to harass and attack the forest. He had really missed a good opportunity to retreat early. After that, the Uxie-Umugel had been attacking the forest intermittently until now. Chapter 959. The original plan of the monster commanders was to let the monster commanders lead an unimaginable number of monsters to attack the Uruk from all directions of Mesopotamia. Ulidim and Uxie-Umugher would attack Quizard-Coatl from the southwest, the Kurur would land from the southeast, Muzamaf and Ujar would mount a surprise attack from the northwest, and finally Basumu and the mysterious existence using Enkidu's body would launch a frontal attack from the north. There were a total of 4 directions to encircle the Uruk. This was the plan formulated by the monster commanders after losing 4 monster commanders. The original plan was to use Uxie-Umugher and Ulidim, who were responsible for attacking the southwest, to launch an attack on Quizard-Coatl as a fuse to temporarily contain Quizard-Coatl. If possible, they would attract the attention of the Uruk side as much as possible. When the Uruk side's attention was diverted to this side, the other monster commanders would launch a joint attack from the Persian Gulf, Mount Abif, and the north to capture the Uruk in one fell swoop. After that, they would besiege Quizard-Coatl. As a result, Ulidim, who went to the southwest jungle to support Uxie-Umugher, was bumped into by Wuming halfway. Moreover, he overestimated himself and wanted to devour Wuming. In the end, he was killed by Wuming and was forced to retreat. In this way, only Uxie-Umugher was left as a monster commander in the southwest, and the plan to use him as a fuse to trigger the final battle had to be changed. The monsters had some kind of special connection with each other. If any monster commander died, the other monster commanders could sense it. The reason why the 10 servants in the previous decapitation operation were discovered so quickly was precisely because of this. In short, after Ulidim died, the monsters immediately changed their plan. They let Uxie-Umugher continue to contain Quizard-Coatl, and let Muzamaf and Ujar's monster army cross the mountains and go straight to the Uruk. At that time, the monsters in the north and the Persian Gulf could still temporarily ignore Quizard-Coatl and take down the Uruk. However, at that time, Muzamaf and Ujar encountered Ishtar, who was pulled into the group by Wuming. After being replenished by Wuming's command spell, Ishtar, who was full of resentment, activated her noble phantasm and directly bombarded the monster army to the point that not even ashes were left. The 2 monster commanders, Muzamaf and Ujar, also fell into the underworld. In the end, Ujar was killed by the goddess of the underworld, and Musamaf took the opportunity to escape. Quetzalcoatl, who was located in the jungle, needed to be contained, so even if they couldn't use it as a fuse, it didn't matter. However, if Ajar and Musamaf failed, it would really be a big crisis. Ishtar's golden star explosion penetrated the underworld and directly became impassable. On the other hand, the monsters in the Persian Gulf were weak, and as a fuse, it seemed a bit unreliable and easy to be targeted by the humans. As a result, after a long time, they could only continue to attack from the north. When the monsters in the north were ready to attack, the monsters in the Persian Gulf also moved at the same time. After all, even if they couldn't surround the Uruk from all directions, attacking the Uruk from the north and the south at the same time was also a good choice. As the saying goes, the worst thing in a team battle is to lose the backline. When the beasts appear in the Persian Gulf, Uruk's side will definitely become anxious, and the whole battle will definitely become advantageous to the beasts. However, Ajar, who was unwilling to be treated as a leftover material, took the initiative to attack the jungle. This attack could be said to be his biggest attack since coming to the jungle in the south. As a beast-shaped magical beast commander, Wushu Mughals' physique was even stronger than those human-shaped magical beast commanders. This was because Wushu Mughal had retained the essence of a wild beast. When faced with a hostile human or a beast, which was more terrifying, it was believed that basically everyone would say that the beast was the beast, because the beast's attack was not logical, that is, unexpected. Especially in a battle to the death, the intelligent human would often think of a way out, while the beast would pay attention to what was in front of them. The monster commanders in the human form also had such a drawback. They had the drawbacks that belonged to humans, and not only that. Even though the magical beast commanders were all magical beasts and enemies of humans, once they gained intelligence and had decent intelligence, it was inevitable that they would fall into the same lowly circle as humans, and that was forming cliques. Based on their appearance, the monster commanders were divided into human form and beast form. The humanoid magical beast commander believed that it was different from the mass-produced magical beasts and was superior to them. Moreover, the humanoid magical beast commander was indeed more in line with the term commander, unlike the pure magical beasts that were categorized as wild beasts. On the other hand, the monster commanders in the beast form believed that the beast form was the form of the monsters, superior, and they should not be proud of being different from other monsters. Similarly, the monster commanders in the beast form retained the essence of a beast. Compared to a commander, they were more like monsters. It had to be said that this was rather ironic, because it was very much like the so-called pro-emperor faction and pro-people faction. Those humanoid magical beast commanders boasted of their arrogance, and they made up the majority of the 11 magical beast commanders. Add to that the fact that some of the beast-type magical beast commanders didn't do anything, and some even switched sides, it could be said that the humanoid magical beast commanders looked down on beast-type magical beast commanders like Ualidim, and the lion-headed magical beast commander Ualidim was a classic example among classic examples. The kobold Ualidim had overestimated himself and wanted to devour Wuming. The lion-headed Ualidim had also thought that the goddess of the underworld would not be able to do anything to him, but in the end they had both been killed. Their deaths were caused by the common flaw of the monster commanders in the human form. Wuming's multiple spells did not kill Ualidim, and Ereshkigal also had to expend some effort to kill Ualidim. From this, it could be seen that the two of them were indeed quite capable. If they had been more careful, they might not have left so easily. When they evolved into human form, they also inherited the weaknesses of humans. Arrogance, conceit, self-conceit, thinking that they had done something, and so on. And it was precisely these weaknesses that harmed them. Ualidim and Ualidim were the best examples. As for the fact that they looked down on the beast form magical beast commanders, although they didn't show it, all the magical beast commanders were well aware of it. Moreover, the best example was the reason why Wushyo Mughar had brought those brainless mass-produced Wushyo Mughar to the southwest border alone to deal with Quetzalcoatl. It was obvious that Ulidim had been isolated. Chapter 960. As for the fact that they looked down on the beast form demonic beast commanders, although they didn't show it, all the demonic beast commanders were well aware of it. Moreover, the reason why Uxia Mughar alone brought those brainless mass-produced Uxia Mughar to the southwest border to deal with Quetzalcoatl was the best example. It was clear that Uxia Mughar had been isolated, traveling from the northernmost fir forest to the southernmost forest, and being the fuse to launch the attack. This kind of tiring work could only be done by the unpopular beast form demonic beast commanders. And it just so happened that Uxia Mughar had the strength and was also a beast form demonic beast commander. No matter what, he was fully qualified to come to the southwest border. But Uxia Mughar probably didn't have good intentions for rushing over. The reason why Uxia Mughar rushed over was probably because he needed to be the supervisor of the beast form demonic beast commander, just like the combination of Uxia Mughar and Mughar. However, Mughar was the beast form demonic beast commander who had switched sides. Although he didn't express it clearly, Muzamaf, who was also a beast-type magical beast commander, had the intention of defecting to the side of the human-type magical beast commander. This made Uxia Mughal, who had noticed this, feel extremely displeased. This was enough to show that the beast form demonic beast commander's camp was far inferior to the human form demonic beast commander's camp. Not only that, the reason why Mughar and Hughar led their mass-produced Mughar and Hughar to raid the Uruk was also because of the instigation, sarcasm, and ridicule of the human form demonic beast commanders. The main purpose of this matter was to test the fighting strength of the Uruk. Apart from that, it was also to make the beast form demonic beast commanders sacrifice one of their members, thus weakening the strength of the beast form demonic beast commanders. Although the beast form demonic beast commanders, Mughar and Hughar, were the first to die, the human form demonic beast commanders also suffered many casualties. For example, the scorpion man Kitabliru and the bull Kusalik both died in the hands of the servants summoned by the human side, while the kobold Uxia Mughar and the lion Uxia Mughar were also killed. Currently, there were only 2 human form demonic beast commanders left. Although the beast form demonic beast commanders didn't do anything and had the intention of switching sides, even so, the advantage of the beast form demonic beast commanders was highlighted. Thinking of this, coupled with the current situation of personally participating in the battlefield, Uxia Mughar felt even more delighted. The human form demonic beast commanders liked to command, while the beast form demonic beast commanders preferred to personally participate. Uxia Mughar and Hughar and Ugar and Wuming's attacks were probing attacks first. Hughar Mughar. If it were Uxia Mughar, he would definitely choose to ambush and kill Hughar at the right time, unlike Uxia Mughar. Of course, trash like the orcs in this forest couldn't arouse Uxia Mughar's interest at all. Only existences like the leopard man could slightly arouse Uxia Mughar's interest. As for the feathered serpent god, Quetzalcoatl, Wushyo Mughar was even more interested in him. Quetzalcoatl was an opponent who was on par with him, or even stronger than him. But this didn't mean that he would be killed in an instant. He had fought with the Quetzalcoatl several times. Although he retreated first every time, he gradually became familiar with Quetzalcoatl's attacking style. The Quetzalcoatl goddess possessed strength that wasn't inferior to the mother goddess. Her fighting style was also as wild as a beast. But that wasn't important. In short, the wildness of the human body was vividly displayed by the Quetzalcoatl goddess. At this thought, Uxia Mughar's blood couldn't help but boil. Roar, roar, roar! Uxia Mughar once again let out a roar filled with magic. This was a declaration of war against the enemy. and the wild-natured Quetzalcoatl goddess Quetzalcoatl naturally couldn't ignore Uxie-Mughar's declaration of war. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. An object that Uxie-Mughar couldn't see clearly spun and whizzed towards Uxie-Mughar. However, Uxie-Mughar didn't need to see it. He had fought with Quetzalcoatl several times before, so even if he couldn't see it, he already knew what it was. It was Quetzalcoatl's weapon. Clang! Uxie-Mughar caught it with the 3 horns on his head and stuck it firmly in the middle of his 3 horns. After all, this was an old opponent, so he wouldn't be hit by this move again. But then, another blurry existence flew over. It was an existence even bigger than the weapon. It was a human figure. It was Quetzalcoatl. Quetzalcoatl's foot landed hard on Uxie-Mughar's head, and it happened to hit Quetzalcoatl's own weapon. The powerful impact instantly kicked the handle of Quetzalcoatl's weapon, which was stuck between Uxie-Mughar's 3 horns. This kick caused the atmosphere to tremble, and Uxie-Mughar couldn't help but kneel down. Boom! Taking advantage of Uxie-Mughar's temporary powerlessness, Quetzalcoatl instantly picked up her weapon and jumped back to the leopard man's side. Uxie-Mughar slowly stood up from the extremely short period of powerlessness. This bit of damage wasn't enough to cause the slightest bit of damage to his powerful body. Crack! But at this moment, one of the 3 horns on Uxie-Mughar's head made a cracking sound. This stunned Uxie-Mughar. Then, Uxie-Mughar's horn broke and fell to the ground in front of him. After fighting with you so many times, I've more or less figured out your fighting style. Quetzalcoatl said to Uxie-Mughar in a lively and cheerful voice like a big sister next door. Uxie-Mughar and Quetzalcoatl had fought a few times, and similarly, Quetzalcoatl had also fought with Uxie-Mughar before. This was something that anyone could figure out. Since Uxie-Mughar could analyze Quetzalcoatl from these few fights, there was no reason why Quetzalcoatl couldn't analyze Uxie-Mughar, right? And this time, Quetzalcoatl broke Uxie-Mughar's horn because of Quetzalcoatl's analysis of Uxie-Mughar. But this time, Uxie-Mughar was completely furious. Chapter 961. Uxie-Mughar's body was quite tough. No matter how Quetzalcoatl hammered and wrestled, she could not cause any obvious damage to Uxie-Mughar because his body took all the hit. This was the strength of a demonic beast commander. Their physical fitness was ridiculously high. As a beast-type demonic beast commander, Uxie-Mughar's physical fitness was even higher than that of other humanoid demonic beast commanders. If it had to be expressed in terms of data, Uxie-Mughar's durability might have reached the EX level. However, although Uxie-Mughar could withstand Quetzalcoatl's attacks, the pain was still transmitted to his mind. Being able to withstand hits did not mean that it did not hurt. These were 2 different things. As one of the 3 goddesses, although Quetzalcoatl's attacks could not directly cause harm to Uxie-Mughar, who had an extremely high physical fitness, she could indirectly cause harm to him. It was precisely because the indirect damage accumulated to a certain extent that Uxie-Mughar retreated. While Quetzalcoatl's attacks did not have much effect on Uxie-Mughar, Uxie-Mughar's attacks did not have much effect on Quetzalcoatl because he really could not catch up to her. Coupled with the terrain of the rainforest and his high agility, Uxie-Mughar, who was constantly under attack, was the first to retreat every time. But both sides could not afford to waste time like this. Whether it was Uxie-Mughar or Quetzalcoatl, both sides were looking for each other's weaknesses. The first to act was Quetzalcoatl. Since she could not cause harm to Uxie-Mughar's tough body, she would attack the less tough parts. Quetzalcoatl aimed at the 3 horns on Uxie-Mughar's head. The 3 horns of Uxie-Mughar, who was known as the Triceratops, were naturally not ordinary horns. Whether it was in terms of sharpness or toughness, they were comparable to the so-called divine weapons, just like Quetzalcoatl's weapon, Makana. But there was a principle that Uxie-Mughar did not understand, and that was the so-called overly tough makes it easy to break. Coincidentally, Quetzalcoatl understood this principle. Quetzalcoatl used her own weapon, Makana, in combination with her wrestling skills. Through the contrast of using softness to overcome toughness, she successfully kicked one of Uxie-Mughar's horns off. Or rather, it was cut off by the vibration of the saw blade. While Wuxiu-Mughar was proud of his 3 horns, he also valued them very much. This was just like how many people valued their hairstyle. To Wuxiu-Mughar, these 3 horns were even more important than a damaged hairstyle. After all, the 3 horns were the proof of Uxie-Mughar's strength. Quetzalcoatl, who had broken one of Uxie-Mughar's horns, had undoubtedly infuriated Uxie-Mughar. Roar, roar, roar! Ignoring the remaining mass-produced Uxie-Mughar in the surroundings, the original Uxie-Mughar completely let the flow of magic in his body flow freely. A huge amount of magic mixed with this extremely high decibel roar spread in all directions. Many collapsed trees on the ground were shattered by the sound waves, and countless orcs and magical beasts were also affected by the roar. Their bodies directly exploded, and the scene became extremely bloody. Quetzalcoatl's expression only changed and she frowned. She was not affected much, but the leopard man could not take it anymore. He covered his ears and fell from the tree. Gudatsi and the others, who had rushed over from behind, also heard the roar. Gudatsi, who was careless, directly knelt on the ground, holding her head as if it was about to split open. Matthew immediately raised his shield in front of Gudatsi. Moreover, the communication between Chaldea and Gudatsi even fluctuated, and thus became unstable. Tachika, that's waving official Heart Roman, who was in Chaldea, only said a few vague words, and the communication was cut off. Hey, Doctor. Dear Leonardo da Vinci. Gudatsi knelt on the ground, holding her head with one hand and looking at the communication device on her wrist with the other. She shouted for Chaldea, but no one picked up. This voice is full of magic. It seems that the roar just now cut off the connection between you and Chaldea, Merlin said as he helped Gudatsi, who was half kneeling on the ground, up. It seems like that's the case. Gudatsi was a little helpless. How could the connection between her and Chaldea always be cut off? This once again showed that Chaldea's equipment was slightly unreliable. Matthew, who was standing in front of Gudatsi and holding his shield to block the sound waves, turned to look at Gudatsi. Senior, what should we do now? Matthew used magic defense, which was similar to a magic release skill, to buff his shield and block the sound waves. There's no other way. Let's wait for the sound waves to stop before we go and take a look. This time, they flew to the city in the dense forest in a pterosaur that could carry people. After being drawn to the human side by Wuming, Quetzalcoatl placed several large pterosaurs in the Uruk for the Uruk to perform emergency tasks, such as supporting a certain place. However, they did not expect that the first use of the pterosaurs placed in the Uruk by Quetzalcoatl would be to support Quetzalcoatl herself. Gilgamesh ordered Siduri to use the pterosaurs to bring Chaldea's people to the dense forest in the southwest. After receiving Quetzalcoatl's order, the pterosaurs would recognize the aura of a few people and treat them as half-masters. Siduri was one of them. That was why Gilgamesh asked Siduri to bring Gudatsi and the others here. Just now, while the demonic beasts were resting, Quetzalcoatl went to greet Chaldea's people and finally let Chaldea's people see the Quetzalcoatl goddess of the Three Goddesses Alliance. After that, the demonic beasts attacked again. The leopard man was the first to attack, followed by Quetzalcoatl. Gudatsi and the others who were slower than the two were left behind. By the way, Fufu was carried by Siduri and left in Eridu. Fortunately, Gudatsi and the others were left behind. Otherwise, if they had to bear the sound waves at such a close distance, Gudatsi would definitely not be able to withstand it. Even if she was lucky enough not to die, she would have fainted. Godotsi was not a brainless protagonist in a hot-blooded manga. She was self-aware. Even if she could not help, she would not be a burden. That was why she proposed to wait for the sound waves to dissipate. Chapter 962. Although Godotsi was worried about the feathered serpent god and the leopard man, she couldn't risk her life. Moreover, her decision would affect more than just her. Matthew, Merlin, and Anna would all be affected. As Godotsi's descendant, Matthew would definitely support Godotsi's decision. As for Merlin's words, it was best to leave them out for the time being. Anna doesn't have any objections, right? After that, Godotsi looked at Anna, who had taken off her hood for some reason. Oh, yeah. I'm fine with it. Anna's face turned red. She was obviously embarrassed to take off her hood in front of so many people. I heard that Anna often helps out at a flower shop. It seems that Anna has been interacting well with others in the Uruk. She doesn't wear a hood to cover her face anymore. Big brother Merlin, I'm really happy. Merlin took the opportunity to tease Anna. However, Anna immediately turned her head and glared at Merlin as if he was a cockroach. Then, Anna put her hood back on her head and raised the undying slaughter blade in her hand. It seemed like she wanted to slash Merlin with her scythe. It seemed that Anna wasn't joking. In order to prevent the existence of an ally, Merlin, from being slashed, Godotsi immediately mediated and changed the topic. Speaking of which, the roar that's still radiating sound waves should be from the demonic beast commander, right? Since there was no way to continue approaching the leopard man and the feathered serpent god, Godotsi wanted to organize the information first. Merlin, who had been in Uruk for half a year and had almost become a local, replied to Godotsi, "That's right. To be able to let out such a roar, there's no one else other than the demon commander. I reckon that the demon commander is probably Uxiu-Mughar, who has the nickname of Triceratop." The main reason was that the magical beast commanders who could make such a roar were basically all dead. Apart from Uxiu-Mughar, there was no other type of magical beast commander that could make such a roar. After all, the other magical beast commanders were not of the right type, so it could only be Uxiu-Mughar. So the magical beast commander is this powerful. Godotsi couldn't help but look in the direction where the sound waves were still coming from. After today's experience, Godotsi had a new understanding of the demonic beast commander, which was definitely stronger than most of the servants. Moreover, the roar of the commander of the beasts could make Godotsi almost fall into a coma. If the commanders of the beasts attacked the north wall together, then would the north wall be able to persist until now? Godotsi had such doubts. Merlin, who saw the doubts in Godotsi's eyes, acted as a caring big brother. "Indeed, this is very strange for you, Fujimaru." Walking to the side of the clean ground, Merlin sat cross-legged with the staff in his hand, and then continued to speak. "So, Fujimaru, what do you think is the ultimate goal of the beasts? Who is the enemy of the beast? Isn't it to destroy the humans and seize the Uruk's holy grail?" Godotsi didn't think and directly blurted out. To be honest, she felt that Merlin's question was full of questions. Wasn't Gorgon's purpose already clear? Is that really the case? Merlin could not help but smile. So, if the humans are wiped out and the Holy Grail in King Gilgamesh's treasury is in their hands, will Gorgon really win? Is it not? Godotsi was completely confused. Wasn't Gorgon's purpose to destroy the humans? Destroy the humans of this era and seize the Holy Grail in Gilgamesh's treasury. In this way, the reason of humanity will be destroyed. However, at this moment, Anna suddenly spoke. "The other two goddesses will not allow Gorgon to do this." Seeing that everyone's attention had been attracted, Anna couldn't help but tighten her hood and didn't say anything else. Just as Anna said, the other two goddesses in the Three Goddesses Alliance will not allow it. Merlin spread out his hands. The Three Goddesses Alliance is nominally a joint attack on the Uruk and humans, but in fact it is a contract made by the three parties to restrain each other. In other words, the three goddesses' alliance was not an alliance from the beginning, but an enemy relationship. Gudatsi nodded. The three parties will temporarily stop fighting with each other, and use their own methods to take down the Uruk without affecting the other two goddesses. The winner will have the ownership of this land. However, whether it is Gorgon, Ereshkigal, or even Quetzalcoatl, they will not really give up. After that, the three parties will definitely start fighting again to see who will finally obtain the ownership of this land. Gorgon is only accumulating strength to deal with the other two goddesses. That's right, destroying the humans and Mesopotamia is only Gorgon's idea. Whether it is Ereshkigal or Quetzalcoatl, they do not have the idea of destroying the humans and Mesopotamia. Then, Merlin briefly explained Gorgon's general plan. For Gorgon, the humans are not the enemy, but the pests that need to be destroyed. The real enemy is the other two goddesses. Therefore, the magical beast commanders think that the humans are in the bag and do not need to deal with them too seriously. They only need to deal with the humans slowly and wait for the magical beasts to reproduce. When the magical beasts reach a certain number, they can destroy the humans and the other two goddesses together. Gorgon cannot directly attack Quetzalcoatl, but he can use the magical beast commanders under his command to contain the Uruk. After that, when the other magical beast commanders break through the Uruk and obtain the Uruk, the contract of the three goddesses will naturally collapse. At that time, Gorgon will naturally besiege Quetzalcoatl with several magical beast commanders, and the Quetzalcoatl will definitely be in the bag. As for Ereshkigal, she can't leave the underworld at all. She can be dealt with last or not at all. Anyway, Gorgon's purpose is to destroy Mesopotamia. If Ereshkigal can't come to the surface to affect her, then Gorgon will not care at all. She only needs to destroy the humans on the surface. That's about it. Merlin nodded with satisfaction at his speech. Wait a minute, Mr. Merlin. Matthew, who was still carrying the shield, could not help but turn his head to look at Merlin. It can't be helped. Merlin's speech is too shocking. How do you know about the magical beast's plan? Chapter 963. Gudatsi grabbed Merlin's neck and made a sound full of surprise. Let go. It's broken. It's going to break. Merlin rolled his eyes. For some reason, Gudatsi's excitement made him so strong that Merlin, a servant, could not break free. Gudatsi, who realized the problem, immediately let go of Merlin and apologized shyly. Sorry. Cough, cough, cough. Merlin, who was lying on the ground, touched his chest and couldn't help but sigh. I'm saved, Merlin, don't change the topic, Anna said while putting Harpa's scythe under Merlin's neck. Calm down, Anna. Are you going to kill me? Merlin was so scared that he didn't dare to move. This immortal slaughtering blade had a special effect on immortal creatures. Although Merlin had relied on half of the dream demon bloodline to survive, he did not want to gamble on whether he was considered an immortal creature or not. Whether the scythe would have any effect on him, he did not want to take the risk at all. He did not want to suffer such a blow. Merlin was very afraid of pain. Even when he bit his tongue while chanting, he would feel pain for a while. I can now cut you down as if you're in cahoots with the demonic beast. What else do you want to say? Anna's small and cold voice was a little bit cold. Looking at Anna's eyes that were filled with coldness, Merlin could feel that if he did not explain himself clearly, Anna would really slash him with a knife. After all, Anna wanted to cut Merlin for a while, so she could take this opportunity to get rid of him. All of this is my own speculation. I extracted some information from one of the commanders of the demons, Ulidim. In addition, Quizzer, who is also a member of the Three Goddesses Alliance with Gorgon, told me something. That's why I was able to speculate. In order to prevent people from not understanding, Merlin explained in detail. After all, the plan made by the demonic beast commanders is not a top-secret plan. As long as you know that the demonic beasts will attack the Uruk from different places, then this plan will become an easy-to-understand open conspiracy. Merlin raised his hands and kept a surrendering look. Anna, can you move this away from my neck? Merlin looked at Anna with a smile and moved Harpa's side with his hand. You escaped, Anna said and took back the scythe from Merlin's neck. When Merlin finally calmed down, Godotzi discovered something. Wait a minute, Merlin, in other words, Assassin also knows? After all, Wuming was the one who killed Ulidim. Since Merlin could extract information from Ulidim, there was no reason that Wuming didn't know about it. Yes, that's it. Merlin patted his sleeves and put his hand on his forehead to observe. The sound wave has almost stopped, let's go. Merlin finished and strode forward. Wait a minute. Merlin, why didn't Assassin and you tell us such important information earlier? Godotzi, who quickly followed Merlin, asked Merlin loudly. Varen Senpai's words probably have his own reasons. Mashu, who had put away her shield, walked to Godotzi's side and said her opinion. That's right. After all, the number of demonic beasts commanders has changed, so the demonic beasts plan will inevitably change. Villo just reserved his opinion. But Merlin, it must be because of his bad taste. Anna followed behind the three and looked at Merlin with disdain. Ah, that's too much, Anna. But Anna answered Merlin seriously. Go to hell, Merlin. Yes. Matthew, who couldn't stand it anymore, interrupted the conversation between the two. The battlefield is in front. Is it really okay to be so casual? Forget it, Matthew, don't worry about Merlin. After all, Godotzi and the others already knew about Merlin's indecent behavior. Yes, Senior. But, I don't know how Assassin and the North Wall are doing now. I'm so worried. Miss Godotzi, who was distracted after saying that Merlin was indecent. At that moment, Matthew could only remain silent. But that feeling of helplessness filled Matthew's face. This way, there really isn't a problem, right? Outside the North Wall, in the sky above Nippur City, Wuming silently looked at the ray that deflected his noble phantasm's attack, and his face turned pale. Before his Yggdrasil hit Nippur City, it was deflected by the rays released by a few giant snake heads that suddenly emerged from the hills of Nippur City. As a result, Yggdrasil only hit half of Nippur City, and half of the demonic beasts seemed to have received an order to gather on the other half of Nippur City. This caused basically no demonic beasts to be killed by this noble phantasm. Yggdrasil landed on the ground and caused a huge explosion. The smoke was dispersed by the natural wind towards the other half of Nippur City, and the dispersed Nippur City was full of mystery. He grabbed Yggdrasil, who had automatically flown back from the ground, and with a swing of his spear, he put Yggdrasil back into his Draconist space. This is not good, Callas. How are your preparations going? I still need some time, Master. Hearing Callas's words, Wuming gave up on a certain idea. If that's the case, let me think of a way to get through this by myself. The difficulty that Wu Ming was talking about was the few huge snakeheads that had shot Yggdrasil's ray that deviated from its course. Wu Ming had seen those snakeheads before. They were formed by Gorgon's hair. Wu Ming had been in close contact with Gorgon last time, so he definitely would not be mistaken. An ethereal voice like that of a god echoed in the sky as if it came from all directions. Wu Ming clearly recognized that the voice came from Nippur City below. It was just that the other party had used magic to make the voice sound like it came from all directions. However, Wu Ming was very confused about the voice. From the sound of it, it seemed to be Gorgon's voice, but Gorgon would not make such meaningless shouts. Gorgon, just half a year shouldn't be enough for you to recover from your injuries. After all, Gorgon said that she would not step out of her blood shrine until she recovered from her injuries. Wu Ming was also very clear that even if Gorgon had the Holy Grail, it was impossible for her to recover from her injuries in such a short period of time. This was because the injuries that Wuming inflicted on Gorgon were caused by his origin force. For Gorgon, who had the origin black soil, Wuming's attack went deep into his bones. The magic provided by the Holy Grail that Gydia created was not enough to heal him. If that was the case, why did Gorgon come here? Why did he make that song-like sound? Chapter 964. Gorgon wouldn't lie to herself. Even if she was a magical creature, she wouldn't go back on her words. It should be said that it was because she was a magical creature that she wouldn't go back on her words. In the stories of people and things outside of humans, the ones who would go back on their words were usually the humans, which was quite ironic. Moreover, Gorgon had now inherited Tiamat's authority. She was now the goddess of magical beasts, and this identity wouldn't allow Gorgon to go back on her words. This had already escalated to a matter of dignity. What's the matter? We've had a deathmatch before. Aren't you prepared to come out and meet this old friend of yours? However, Gorgon didn't react at all, as if she didn't hear him. In that case, Wuming said and raised a hand. For victory, come to me quickly. Undying sun, please bestow upon me a shining steed. Horses with enough intelligence, bring me the light wheel that symbolizes your master. Wuming immediately used his authority, the incarnation of the sun. A scorching fireball suddenly appeared on Wuming's palm, then suddenly expanded. The originally palm-sized fireball instantly became dozens of times larger, and the massive magic power it emitted made one wonder if there was a holy grail stuffed inside. At that moment, Wuming, who was holding the sun, also appeared rather small. Since you're not coming out, then let me invite you out? Wuming exerted strength from his waist, and the hand holding the sun instantly swung downward. The sun in that hand was controlled by Wuming's telekinesis and fell to the ground extremely slowly. Why did he have to land slowly? Because Wuming wanted to see how these magical beasts would meet their end. Tsk, tsk, tsk. Like a heavenly fire descending to the world, the bizarre temperature of the sun scorched the ground, causing it to dry up and crack open. Even the magical beasts directly collapsed to the ground, emitting an unknown gas all over their bodies. Their bodies gradually shriveled and burned, and they couldn't be more dead. Paralysis was due to the high temperature. The unknown gas was due to the aroma of meat emitted by the high temperature. The shriveled body was due to the evaporation of the moisture in the body by Wuming's sun. The burning was due to the extremely dry fur spontaneously combusting in the extreme heat. Even the smoke caused by Yggdrasil's explosion was quickly disappearing. Gradually, the city that was dyed red by the high temperature and began to burn gradually revealed itself. Because there were no longer any human beings in Nippur, and there were no signs of human habitation nearby, Wuming infused the incarnation of the sun with a lot of magic power. When there was no one around and he did not care about the gains and losses, Wuming could totally unleash his ultimate move, just like what he did to Ulidim back then. This was also the reason why Wuming wanted to come alone. In an instant, the entire city of Nippur became a city of flames. This reminded Wuming of the burning city of Winterwood where he met Gudatsi and the rest. The smoke disappeared completely. Apart from the flames, there was nothing else in the entire city of Nippur. Gorgon was also nowhere to be seen, leaving only a few holes on the ground. It was obvious that Gorgon had only revealed his head that was full of snake heads, and his real body was still underground. Since you don't want to come out, then I don't have to worry about it. Wuming snorted and removed the control of the sun incarnation. Suddenly, the entire sun incarnation turned into a meteor that was about to fall to the ground. In the next second, the meteor fell, and Nippur finally fulfilled Wuming's wish and exploded. Boom! Flames completely covered Nippur, and the city that was originally built on hills was now completely flattened. Much of the land had even turned into magma due to the high temperature. The loud explosion carried a strong penetrating force as though it could penetrate one's ears. However, Wu Ming, who was in the range of the explosion, did not even blink. He silently looked at the completely transformed Nippur that was covered in flames and magma. Although his sun incarnation was indeed powerful enough to be used as a trump card, Wu Ming did not think that Gorgon would die under this move. Otherwise, Gorgon would be too easy to deal with. As expected, Gorgon's strange screams came from the magma and flames again. However, as though it was a counterattack, the screams this time were filled with magic. The magma exploded, the flames were extinguished, and thick smoke billowed into the air. "You're out." Wu Ming calmed himself down. However, in the next second, several silver-white chains rushed out from the thick smoke. Clang! Several chains with silver wedges at the end swept toward Wu Ming at a speed faster than the naked eye could see. However, these silver-white chains were greeted by silver-white chains with specks of gold. Clang, 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 clang. The ends of the chains with specks of gold also had wedges in the same shape as the silver chains. The wedges collided directly with the wedges, and a crisp sound was transmitted from the wedges to the chains for a long time. These chains with specks of gold extended from Wu Ming's arm. Wu Ming's arm that originally had nothing on it was now wrapped with a golden chain. At the same time, golden ripples appeared around Wu Ming, and several golden chains extended from it. Including the one on Wu Ming's arm, the number of golden chains was exactly the same as the silver-white chains that attacked him. The silver-white chains paused in the air for a moment, as though their users were stunned. Then, several silver-white chains turned into golden particles and dissipated, as though they were abandoned after being used up. This was quite similar to Gilgamesh's fighting style. At the same time, the chains that extended from the golden ripples around Wu Ming were also retracted. Whether it was Enkidu's automatic attack or the golden ripples around Wu Ming, they were all Enkidu's own ideas. Wu Ming didn't interfere at all. "Enkidu, are you okay?" Wu Ming, who had already guessed who attacked him with the chains, was rather worried about Enkidu. After all, in a sense, Enkidu was fighting with him just now. That's right, the silver-white chains that attacked Wu Ming just now were the fake ones that Wu Ming saw when he left the arena last time. The fake Enkidu who stole Enkidu's body. Clang, clang, clang. Enkidu didn't say anything. Instead, the chain that represented her gently touched Wu Ming's cheek, as if to say that she was fine, or as if to comfort Wu Ming. Enkidu knew that fighting with someone who stole her body was the last thing that Wu Ming wanted to see. Because, even if only the body was Enkidu, it was still Enkidu. Chapter 965. Don't worry about me. Although I'll show mercy to the person using your body, I won't put myself in danger. Moreover, then, Wu Ming looked down at the place where the chain had come out from. I'm afraid the opponent won't hurt me. First of all, the real purpose of the chain wasn't to pierce the enemy, but to bind the enemy. This was a very important point. Of course, piercing the enemy was also possible, but Wu Ming didn't think that he would be pierced. In order to prove this point, Wu Ming didn't move at all. He didn't defend, counterattack, or even dodge. Wu Ming wanted to see if the chain would bind him. Wu Ming bet that there was a 99% chance that the chain would bind him instead of piercing him. As for why Wu Ming felt that nothing would happen to him, and why was he so confident that the opponent wouldn't hurt him? That was because, even if the opponent wasn't Enkidu on the inside, the body was still Enkidu. Wu Ming believed that as long as it was Enkidu, the opponent wouldn't hurt him. Why was Wu Ming so sure? There had to be some evidence, right? Last time, when Wu Ming was forced to leave, the fake Enkidu had developed feelings for Wu Ming. Wu Ming wasn't a block of wood, and he wasn't someone who couldn't see the details. That was why Wu Ming had seen everything clearly. It seemed like the opponent's body was affected by using Enkidu, which was why he developed feelings for Wuming. However, it was up to the opponent to decide what would happen. That was why Wuming wanted to do an experiment to see what the fake Enkidu would do to him. In the end, perhaps because he saw himself attacking Wuming, Enkidu couldn't hold back and attacked, which disrupted Wuming's plan. You should at least believe in yourself. After all, that's your body. I don't think the other party will do anything to me. After hearing Wuming's words, Enkidu's chain drooped down, as if he was sad to be lectured by Wuming. All right, I'm not blaming you. Be good. Enkidu gently stroked the chain and regained his vitality. After that, Enkidu once again wrapped around Wuming's body, but this time, he didn't conceal himself. Enkidu also knew that Kalas was busy, so he let her assist Wuming. The heavenly lock that had undergone an extraordinary transformation was the best weapon against deities. It's about time. Wuming was naturally referring to Gorgon. In the thick smoke below, Enkidu was half kneeling on the scorched ground with one hand covering his head and the other supporting his body on the ground. It was obvious that he was greatly traumatized. That's the real Enkidu, Enkidu said with a trembling voice, as if he was affected by the short exchange with the real Enkidu. A voice covered in magic came from the ground, and the ground covered in smoke started to crack, as if something was about to come out. So he subconsciously counterattacked because of the other party's attack. Enkidu frowned as he thought of something. Then let him cause a scene. Enkidu stood up and tried to look at Wuming through the smoke, but the magic in the smoke made Enkidu's vision quite blurry. Ugh! Enkidu couldn't help but let out a muffled groan. After confirming that there was something wrong with him, Enkidu decided to leave this place. The demonic beasts here have been wiped out. He was ready to go to other places to gather the demonic beasts and attack the north wall together with the commander. As for Wuming, he would leave it to her to deal with him. At this moment, from Wuming's perspective, a green-haired figure in white suddenly came out of the smoke and flew towards the north wall. Trying to run? Although his plan didn't come to fruition, the fact that the guy using Enkidu's body was able to escape proved that his plan was partially correct. At the very least, he could tell that the other party really didn't want to attack Wuming. But how could Wuming just watch Enkidu leave? Immediately, Wuming increased his telekinesis to control his body and tried to follow Enkidu. However, an attack came out of the smoke. A black ray of destruction was shot out. Luckily, Wuming stopped in time, or else he would have been hit. It's different from the previous ray. The purple ray that stopped Wuming's sun transformation was different. This time, the black ray made Wuming feel very dangerous. It's the ray of the demon eye of petrification. Last time when Wuming fought with Gorgon, Gorgon's magic eye of petrification was ineffective against Wuming after he revealed his true form. Now, Wuming's spiritual base wasn't as strong as it was when he revealed his true form. If he was hit by this ray of petrification, he would gradually turn into stone, but the speed would be as slow as a curse. Moreover, the ray shot out by Gorgon's magic eye of petrification not only had the effect of petrification, but it also had a great destructive power, just like the purple ray that Gorgon used before. The purple ray that was formed by pure magic had the power to shift Wuming's sun transformation. Although it didn't seem like a big deal, Wuming was very clear about it. After all, it was his own incarnation that was shifted. In Wuming's view, the sun incarnation that was in free fall wouldn't be shifted so easily. Gorgon used the purple ray to destroy a corner of the sun incarnation, causing the sun incarnation to shift in an unbalanced state. Obviously, Gorgon's ray had a very powerful destructive power, otherwise it would be impossible to destroy Wuming's attack. The magic eye of petrification just now was even more so. Through the petrification ray, Wuming could feel that if Wuming was hit, he would probably be knocked away. It didn't seem to be anything special, but that was only for Wuming. If a human was hit by that attack, they probably wouldn't even be petrified and would be completely destroyed. Really, you don't show up when you should, but show up when you shouldn't. Before, Gorgon was provoked by Wooming and didn't show up, but when Wooming was ready to chase Enkidu, she showed up again. Then, you and I will take advantage of this to decide the winner. After saying that, Wooming waved his hand, and several phalanxes appeared behind Wooming. It was the Manchala phalanx. Immediately afterward, the Manchala phalanx condensed and turned into a holy sword that looked very much like the Excalibur. This was the divine sword of salvation, the divine sword of salvation that was specially used to kill the demon king. Today, let me see if my divine sword of salvation can kill you, Gorgon. Chapter 966. What responded to Wooming was Gorgon's strange cry again. After hearing it a few times, Wooming even felt an inexplicable sense of familiarity. Not only that, but several black petrification rays with a diameter of a few meters were also ejected from the thick fog. Wooming raised the Savior Divine Blade high. Lightning flashed on the blade of the Savior Divine Blade, and it emitted a rather strange pale light. Clang! The sound of a sword being unsheathed came from the Savior Divine Blade. Then, Wooming slashed the Savior Divine Blade at the incoming petrification rays. Countless lightning bolts collided with Gorgon's petrification rays and cut them vertically from the middle like a hot knife cutting through butter. After that, the power of the lightning bolts from the Savior Divine Blade did not weaken at all and rushed toward Gorgon in the thick fog. The thick fog was instantly split apart by the lightning bolts from the Savior Divine Blade and spread to both sides. The lightning bolts from the Savior Divine Blade finally slashed at Gorgon's tail. Although the Savior Divine Blade's attack had power left after cutting through Gorgon's petrification rays, it was not enough to cause fatal damage to Gorgon. Gorgon used his thick and tough tail to block the attack from Wooming's Savior Divine Blade. Gorgon's tail was torn open. The power of the lightning bolts made Gorgon's cracked tail look like roasted meat. Wooming even saw that part of Gorgon's wound was similar to cooked meat. Wooming even wondered if he could smell the fragrance of meat if he was close enough. But then, Wooming had a trace of doubt. Gorgon's wound had not healed. This was impossible for Gorgon, who had Tiamat's authority. Tiamat's authority would allow Gorgon to recover quickly. Last time, Gorgon did not recover because Wooming's injury was caused by a trace of black mud in Gorgon's body. That was why he could not recover. But now Gorgon did not have the slightest trace of the black mud in his body. Even if the Savior Divine Blade had a trace of origin power, this should not be the result. Then, Wooming noticed something wrong again. Wait, what's that? A pair of huge and curved horns grew on Gorgon's head. Gorgon's tail could block Gorgon's body and face, but it could not block the horns. Gorgon slowly lowered his tail, causing the air to tremble. Because the thick fog had completely disappeared, a new Gorgon appeared in front of Wooming. He still had the upper body of a woman and the lower body of a snake. His entire body was covered in purplish-black scales. A pair of angelic wings with golden feathers curled up behind his back. Countless long purple hair turned into giant purple snakes that swaggered around Gorgon. It could be said that apart from the addition of the huge pair of curled horns on Gorgon's head, Gorgon did not change at all. Gorgon's eyes were still the same square petrified eyes, but his eyes seemed to have lost their light as if he had lost his self-consciousness. Gorgon raised his head and looked at Wooming with his lifeless eyes. Then, he slowly opened his mouth, revealing a mouthful of thin but sharp fangs. The special sound from before came out of Gorgon's mouth again, and the effect was more obvious than before. The sound, which was stronger than the sound wave, spread out in a manner visible to the naked eye with Gorgon as the center. Everything that was affected was crushed and flattened. The city of Nippur, which was originally filled with charred ground and dark ruins, was instantly razed to the ground. It even went a few meters underground. Wuming could even see the dark underground passage where Gorgon was hiding. However, the sound wave did not diminish and continued to spread to the surroundings. The grassy land and specially opened roads outside Nippur instantly disappeared. Probably because the sound wave had weakened, the land was not dug up like in Nippur. However, it was not much better because after the sound wave, only bare land was left. Wuming, who was flying in the sky, was also affected. The sound wave made him take a few steps back. Wuming put down the arm in front of him that was used to block the sound wave, then comforted the restless Enkidu. He looked at Gorgon with a serious expression. This guy was no longer Gorgon. Wuming knew this very well. This guy is Tiamat. When Wuming said this, Enkidu's heavenlock became even more restless, as if he agreed with Wuming's words. Wuming had indeed never seen Tiamat. After all, when Wuming came to the Mesopotamia and Uruk, Tiamat had already been divided into heaven and earth by the gods of the Sumer and banished to the void dimension. Therefore, Wuming did not have the opportunity to see Tiamat. However, Wuming had once entered the mirror world to retrieve his class card, and entering the mirror world required passing through the void dimension. Coincidentally, at the last time, in order to retrieve Gilgamesh's class card, Wuming, Elia, Mayu, Bazet, and the others entered the mirror world together. When passing through the void dimension, Wuming inadvertently heard a voice that sounded like a poignant but beautiful song. Moreover, when Wuming returned to the Mesopotamia last time, he also dreamed of Tiamat when he was sleeping by the roadside in the south. At that time, the voice in his dream was the same as the one he heard when passing through the void dimension. They were both poignant but beautiful songs. Now that he thought about it carefully, if he ignored Gorgon's mature voice, the voice that Gorgon was making at this moment could be said to be exactly the same as Tiamat's voice. So, the current Gorgon was actually Tiamat, the true goddess of the monsters. The only change that happened to Gorgon's body could prove this point. The huge pair of twisted horns on his head was obviously not something that Gorgon could have. There were no rumors in Greek mythology of monsters with such strange horns that could petrify people. There were no such records in the adapted stories or the Orthodox myth. The only difference between Gorgon at this singularity was that he had accepted Tiamat's authority. Obviously, the current Gorgon had indeed been assimilated by Tiamat. No wonder you can reproduce monster commanders that are several times stronger than servants. Wuming now understood how the strengthening type monsters and monster commanders came about. About 3 months ago, or even earlier, Gorgon, who was recuperating in the blood shrine and possessed Tiamat's authority, was assimilated by Tiamat's authority for some reasons that Wuming did not know. Chapter 967. Although there was only a slight difference in her appearance, she had been completely assimilated by Tiamat. It wouldn't be wrong to say that she was Tiamat now. The pair of huge and twisted horns were undoubtedly part of Tiamat's body, which was rumored to have a dragon's body. Moreover, looking at Gorgon's lifeless eyes, Wuming wasn't sure if he had completely lost his self-awareness. At least, that was what Wuming thought. At this moment, Gorgon didn't have the aura of an avenger. Instead, he was filled with motherly instincts, like a mother who overly spoiled her child. Wuming guessed that this assimilation probably occurred 3 months ago or even earlier. After that, Gorgon, who was assimilated by Tiamat, produced 10 powerful magical beast commanders. Together with the fake Enkidu, they formed a lineup of 11 magical beast commanders, which symbolized the 11 sons of Tiamat. But what puzzled Wuming was, what exactly caused Gorgon to be assimilated by Tiamat's authority? When Gorgon used Tiamat's authority to fight against Wuming, Wuming didn't see anything wrong with it. Gorgon looked as if he was completely in control of Tiamat's authority. Could it be that Gorgon's control over Tiamat's authority weakened after fighting with Wuming, which caused Gorgon to be assimilated by Tiamat's authority? Or was there some other reason, such as the unknown person who used Enkidu's body? No matter what, Gorgon is no longer Gorgon, but Tiamat. However, there was still one thing that Wuming was puzzled about. Gorgon's injuries hadn't healed on their own. Wuming slashed at Gorgon with the blade of salvation, but Gorgon blocked it with its tail. Naturally, there was a crack on its tail, and it had not recovered yet. In fact, there was no sign of recovery at all. This was very strange. Even if I'm assimilated, I shouldn't be unable to use authority, right? Wuming wondered. The assimilated Gorgon did not mean that he was no longer Gorgon. It was just that Tiamat was added to the foundation of Gorgon. Gorgon's consciousness was suppressed or disappeared because he could not defeat Tiamat. The one controlling Gorgon's body was probably Tiamat. However, this body's abilities shouldn't have disappeared, so why didn't the wound on Gorgon's tail heal? Wuming had no idea what was going on. Then, Wuming looked in the direction where the fake Enkidu left. That guy should know what's going on. Unfortunately, that guy escaped, and Wuming was now entangled with Gorgon, who was controlled by Tiamat, so he couldn't chase after him and ask for an explanation. However, Wuming didn't have time to think about it, because Gorgon, who was controlled by Tiamat, started attacking again. As Gorgon sang, several dark purple magic circles appeared in front of Gorgon's head, or more accurately, in front of Gorgon's eyes. Then, a black ray of light shot out from the magic circles towards Wuming. Not only that, but the snake heads formed by Gorgon's hair were also brewing and shooting out the same black ray from time to time. Although these rays were not as big as the black ray of light, Wuming knew very well that these rays were petrification rays that could petrify people. Whoosh! Wuming's rapid movement caused the atmosphere to tremble. Wuming danced in the black ray of light and flew towards Gorgon below. Wuming used the sword of salvation to block the black ray from time to time, cut it from time to time, and dodge it from time to time. Gorgon's petrification rays did not affect Wuming at all. Since there was no time for Wuming to think, Wuming decided not to think. Isn't Gorgon unable to heal himself? So let's cut Gorgon first before we talk about it. Wuming approached Gorgon bit by bit. Gorgon's countless snake heads attacked Wuming like giant pythons that could eat a person in one bite. In the next second, Wuming's celestial lock extended, split, and lengthened, piercing or binding the snake head. Enkidu, who had the property of restraining gods, was very effective against Gorgon's hair. Wuming, on the other hand, moved towards Gorgon's head step by step along the snake heads. Wuming used the martial arts engraved in his bones to cut Gorgon's snake heads up and down. Countless purple blood-like liquid flowed out of the snake heads. While dodging the purple blood, Wuming also paid attention to the petrification rays that were shot at him from time to time. After all, not all of the snake heads were biting Wuming. Many of them were charging up power to release petrification rays from afar. However, these petrification rays were either blocked by Wuming's sword of salvation or dodged sideways. As a result, Gorgon could not catch or stop Wuming at all. It could only watch as Wuming approached it bit by bit. However, it was fortunate that the snake heads killed by Wuming were in a state where they could not be restored, just like Gorgon. Otherwise, Wuming would have a much harder time moving forward. The obstruction brought by the snake heads that could be restored infinitely and the obstruction brought by the snake heads that could not be restored were two different levels. After all, if it was the latter, the number of snake heads obstructing Wuming would gradually decrease. But even if it was the former, Wuming was not afraid at all. After all, he was a warrior trained by the queen of the country of shadows, Skaha. Not only did he not drop his guard against the snake heads around him, but he also swam through the sea of snake heads with ease. If Musasobo Benkei and Nawakamaru saw this, they would definitely be full of praise for Wuming's skills. Wuming's martial arts were basically shelved because of Wuming's fighting style, but this did not mean that Wuming forgot the martial arts he learned, or that Wuming did not know how to use them. How could he forget the martial arts he was trained by the Queen of the Country of Shadows, Skahar? Even now, Wuming's body still trembled slightly when he recalled the experience of being trained by Skahar. It could only be said that not being a human played a big role. If he was an ordinary person, he would probably die in the middle of the training. Although Wuming persevered, the hardships he went through were not enough to let others know. Cough cough. Wuming took advantage of the fact that Gorgon could not stop him and sped up. Because he maintained his human form, Wuming was quite small compared to Gorgon. The closer he got to Gorgon, by Wuming, the greater the contrast between him and Gorgon. Probably a little panicked because he could not stop Wuming from advancing too quickly, Gorgon made a strange sound again. This time, the sound was full of unwillingness. However, Wuming did not care whether Gorgon was willing or not. Even if Wuming's eyes were fixed on Gorgon's eyes, because Gorgon's eyes were already in a lifeless state, Wuming could not see anything. As for why Wuming paid attention to Gorgon's eyes, it was because Wuming wanted to attack Gorgon's eyes. After all, no matter the reason, it was true that Gorgon could not heal himself at the moment. Whether it was Gorgon's tail or Gorgon's snake hair, they all proved this. Therefore, Wuming planned to destroy Gorgon's demonic eyes of petrification first before thinking about other things. If Gorgon lost the demonic eyes of petrification, it could be said that Gorgon was a tiger without its teeth and claws. At best, it would only be a slightly bigger monster. There was nothing to be afraid of. Of course, the premise was that Gorgon had no other abilities after being assimilated by Tiamat's authority. However, Wuming did not know what exactly happened to Gorgon, nor did he know if the current Gorgon had any other abilities that Wuming did not know of. After all, the conclusion that Gorgon has been assimilated by Tiamat's authority was only Wuming's guess, although it was very likely to be the case. However, a guess was just a guess. It could only be used as backup information. Wuming lacked accurate information. Therefore, Wuming was taking a gamble. Or rather, he could only take a gamble. Bzzz. Wuming, who was getting closer and closer to Gorgon, held the sword of salvation that was emitting a trace of electric light. That was the sign that the sword of salvation was accumulating the thunder of salvation. In the world of the deicide, the sword of salvation was a weapon specially created by the gods for Rama to slay the demon king. Not only was it the materialization of the Manchala formation that stored the gods' weapons, but it was also the embodiment of the weapon that slayed the demon king in Rama's story, the indestructible blade. Because Rama, as a hero, was the existence that dealt with the demon king, and Rama himself had the legend of slaying the demon king, Rabona, the thunder of salvation that filled the sword of salvation was also a special attack against demons. Whether it was the demon king or monster, as long as there was demon in it, it would be included in the special attack range of the thunder of salvation. Gorgon's petrification ray undoubtedly had demon in it. The reason why it could easily split apart Gorgon's petrification ray was because of this special effect. This point was very similar to Rama's weapon, the indestructible blade. His weapon also had a special effect against demon. It could only be said that no matter which world Rama was from, there was indeed a similarity. And Wu Ming was going to use this thunder of salvation against the demonic nature to destroy Gorgon's demonic eye and make it half crippled. Looking at Gorgon's head that was only a few dozen meters away, Wuming suddenly jumped away from the snake hair that served as a runway to approach Gorgon. The distance of only a few dozen meters was a very close distance for Wuming, or for any servant, so Wu-Ming directly jumped up and no longer used the snake hair as a runway to approach Gorgon. The snake hair that was used as a runway by Wu-Ming directly exploded the moment Wu-Ming jumped up. It was as if it was kicked by the powerful energy generated by Wu-Ming's kick. This was enough to show how powerful Wu-Ming was. Wu-Ming, who was flying in the air, looked like he had lost his footing. This made the snake hair in the distance close in, ready to directly bite Wu-Ming to death. However, Enkidu once again showed his power. Countless heavenly locks shot out from Wu-Ming's body and pierced the snake heads on the snake hair. Not only did it prevent the snake hair from interfering with Wu-Ming's actions, but it also allowed Wu-Ming to take one step closer. The heavenly locks that wrapped around Wu-Ming's body were like a swing. Along with the many snake heads that pierced into Wu-Ming's body, the heavenly locks directly swung Wu-Ming away. Coupled with the force of Wu-Ming's jump, and the support from Wu-Ming's telekinesis, this scene appeared on the scene. Wu-Ming, who was still a few dozen meters away from Gorgon, used less than 0.01 seconds to arrive in front of Gorgon's head. To be more precise, he arrived in front of Gorgon's magic eyes of petrification. At that moment, Wu-Ming also stabbed the sword of salvation into Gorgon's eyes and released the thunder of salvation that gathered on the sword of salvation. Explode. Sword of salvation. After accumulating for a long time, the thunder of salvation broke out in an unprecedented way. The moment it broke out, even Wu-Ming was temporarily blinded. Besides the vast expanse of whiteness in front of Wu-Ming, there was nothing else. It was almost a form of self-suggestion. When a person closed their eyes, their remaining senses, their ears, would become very useful. This was why students who liked to catch up on sleep between classes found the sound to be particularly loud. At this moment, Wu-Ming's ears were filled with the deafening sound of thunder and the miserable cries of Gorgon. In the air, Wu-Ming could even feel the strong wind caused by Gorgon, shaking violently due to the pain. Listening to this mournful cry, Wu-Ming inexplicably felt a trace of pity. However, now was not the time to think about this. Enkidu! Wu-Ming, who had temporarily lost his vision, immediately shouted out Enkidu's name. Clatter! The sound of chains, accompanied by the sound of thunder and the miserable cries of Gorgon, filled Wu-Ming's ears. At the same time, Wu-Ming also felt the heaven lock firmly wrapped around his body. At the next moment, a different map appeared in Wu-Ming's mind after activating his telekinesis. At the same time, Wu-Ming, who had activated his telekinesis, also projected Gorgon's current situation into his mind. At this moment, Gorgon spread out its hands, its broken hair fluttering in the wind. It raised its head and roared at the sky. This extremely miserable scene appeared in Wu-Ming's mind. Forcibly suppressing the inexplicable pity in his heart, Wu-Ming looked at a certain direction on the ground and instantly threw Enkidu down. The end of the heaven lock was wrapped around Wu-Ming's body. When Wu-Ming threw the wedge of the heaven lock to the ground, Enkidu would bring Wu-Ming away from Gorgon. Although Wu-Ming, who was temporarily blinded, could still see, for the sake of safety, Wu-Ming still wanted to get away from Gorgon first. It was inevitable that the other party had other abilities that Wu-Ming did not know about. As expected, when Wu-Ming felt that he was being dragged to the ground by Enkidu, something new happened to Gorgon. Chapter 968. Ah! A shrill female voice came out of Gorgon's mouth, a roar filled with hatred that would make anyone who heard it tremble in fear. Not only that, Gorgon's voice no longer sounded like a singing voice, it sounded more like the voice of Gorgon's own consciousness. The maternal aura of Gorgon had completely disappeared, and the aura of hatred that belonged to the Avenger filled Gorgon once again. All of this proved that Gorgon had turned back into Gorgon. Kingu! Where are you? Kingu! Ah! My eyes! My eyes! Kingu! Where are you? Come back to me! Gorgon let out a terrifying roar as he covered his eyes that were bleeding purple blood with both hands. Not only that, but Gorgon's snake hair and injured tail that had been cut off by Wu Ming were also recovering at a slow but visible speed. It can heal itself? Wu Ming was confused. Could it be that Gorgon was not completely assimilated by Tiamat's authority? Could it be that it was only the surface that was assimilated, and it would heal if it was seriously injured? Just as Wu Ming was puzzled, a large amount of black semi-liquid suddenly emerged from Gorgon's wounds that had not fully recovered. It was the origin black soil. Wu Ming could feel the power of the origin black soil contained within it. The origin black soil reacted with the wounds caused by Wu Ming's blade of salvation, further increasing Gorgon's pain. His roar gradually became louder than that of a magical beast. Could it be that the reason why Gorgon was assimilated by Tiamat's authority was because of the origin black soil? Just as Wu Ming was thinking, Enkidu had already pulled Wu Ming to the ground. Wu Ming didn't need to use any force. He easily stood on the ground, stirring up a cloud of sand. What the hell is going on? Looking at Gorgon, who was some distance away from him, Wu Ming was not in a hurry to make his next move. Instead, he fell into deep thought. Gorgon, who seemed to have been assimilated by Tiamat, did not have the slightest trace of the black origin mud in his body and was unable to heal himself. However, Gorgon, who had been severely injured, broke away from Tiamat's assimilation and leaked the black origin mud from his body. Furthermore, Gorgon's self-healing ability had also returned. Most importantly, who was the Kingu that Gorgon mentioned? In the legends, the son and companion of Tiamat, the god who led 11 magical beasts against the gods but was killed. This was the story of Kingu in myths, and Wu Ming knew this as well. However, there was no such thing as Kingu in this singularity, right? Wait a minute. Wu Ming suddenly thought of something. Could it be that the guy who used Enkidu's body was Kingu? However, Wu Ming was once again puzzled. If it was really Kingu who used Enkidu's body, it was impossible for him to be affected by Enkidu's body. Whether it was the reaction of the fake Enkidu when Wu Ming left last time, or the reaction of the fake Enkidu when he left just now, it meant that the fake Enkidu was affected by the reaction of Enkidu's body to Wu Ming and the real Enkidu. If it was a god of the same generation as deity An, how could Kingu be affected by the residual memory of less than 100 years? If it was really Kingu, it would definitely not be affected by Enkidu's body, and it would definitely completely crush the residual memory of Enkidu's body. The Kingu that Gorgon mentioned could only be the fake Enkidu who used Enkidu's body. Other than him, there shouldn't be anyone else on the magical beast side, right? Or was the real Kingu hiding in the dark? As expected, I still have to find him and ask him clearly. Wu Ming was naturally referring to the fake Enkidu. However, before the first wave of trouble subsided, Ishtar used the connection she established with Wu Ming to ask for help from Wu Ming. Hyunryong, this is a big crisis. I'm going to die. Hurry up and give me mana. Ishtar's impolite words were transmitted into Wu Ming's mind. This gave Wu Ming a fright. Wu Ming immediately checked Ishtar's mana, but it was completely empty. Not only that, Ishtar was constantly being attacked, and her spiritual base was slowly being damaged. Could it be that she encountered a magical beast commander? That was most likely the case. After thinking about it carefully, it was possible to arrange a magical beast commander in the Persian Gulf, such as the one that was based on the mass-produced magical beast Kurur. It was probably that the magical beast commander was hiding underwater, waiting for Ishtar to exhaust her mana after dealing with other mass-produced magical beasts before attacking Ishtar. This caused Ishtar to be unable to fight back. But remember to be more polite next time. With this sentence, the last arrow-shaped mana crystal on the back of Wu Ming's right hand disappeared, and Ishtar, who was in the Persian Gulf, was instantly filled with mana. Understood. Ishtar replied to Wuming through the connection between the contract, and then began to counterattack. At this point, the 3 mana crystals prepared for Ishtar were exhausted. When Wuming transferred mana to Ishtar, Gorgon became more extreme. Kingu, my son, come to my side. Kingu, did you betray me? His rationality was gradually suppressed by pain and anger. Magical beasts, my sons, your mother needs you. As if connected by blood, Gorgon's roar could only be heard a few kilometers away, but the mass-produced magical beasts in the Mesopotamia seemed to have heard Gorgon's words. Their eyes turned completely scarlet, and their bodies grew several times in an instant. Whether it was speed or strength, they had an unprecedented increase. It was as if they had entered a berserk mode. The soldiers at the front line of the north wall were caught off guard by these enhanced magical beasts. For a moment, the soldiers' routine tactics to deal with the magical beasts were broken. Several magical beasts rushed to the iron gate under the north wall and launched an attack. Even the gate was broken. The north wall was in great danger. The magical beast commander's strength was also enhanced. Ishtar, who was originally supported by Wuming's mana, regained her advantage and blocked the attacks of the mermaid Kururu and the mermaid Kururu. However, for some reason, the magical beasts of Kururu were suddenly enhanced, and this caught Ishtar off guard. This, what the hell is going on? Ishtar cried as she helplessly retreated. If she did not retreat, she would be surrounded by the magical beasts in the Persian Gulf today. The Persian Gulf was in great danger. Chapter 969. The same great danger also existed in the territory of the feathered serpent god. In the southern jungle, Uxiu-Mughar, who was fighting the feathered serpent god, was about to retreat. The mass-produced Uxiu-Mughar he brought with him had basically been wiped out by another group of humans who had rushed over to provide support. But at this moment, just like the other magical beast commanders, Uxiu-Mughar also sensed the call of the mother goddess. Uxiu-Mughar also entered a temporary berserk mode. This time, Uxiu-Mughar, who originally wanted to retreat temporarily, did not retreat anymore. He charged directly at the leopard man and quizzed. For a moment, Uxiu-Mughar, who was much faster than before, did not allow the leopard man to react in time. Half of her body was torn apart by Uxiu-Mughar's claws, and she was sent flying by the inertia caused by Uxiu-Mughar's attack. Leopard man? Quizzard was shocked. Why did this Uxiu-Mughar suddenly go berserk? But now, Quizzard did not have time to think, because Uxiu-Mughar charged at her with extreme speed and used his huge claws to press down on Quizzard. Great danger! Gudatsi and the others, who had been asked by the leopard man and Quizzard to be in charge of eliminating the mass-produced Uxiu-Mughar, were not in a good situation either. Gudatsi and the others had joined the feathered serpent gods group and were gradually wiping out the mass-produced Uxiu-Mughar. They were even prepared to help deal with the commander Uxiu-Mughar. But because of Gorgon, although the number of mass-produced Uxiu-Mugals had been reduced to a certain extent, each mass-produced Uxiu-Mugals had become more powerful. Originally, Mashu could deal with 2 or 3 mass-produced Uxiu-Mugals, but now it was difficult for Mashu to deal with 1 mass-produced Uxiu-Mugals. At the same time, Merlin was half-kneeling on the ground for some reason and vomiting blood. Gudatsi and the others were also panicking because of Merlin's sudden change. Merlin? What's wrong with you? Gudatsi was escorted to Merlin's side by Matthew, and she asked with concern. Merlin shifted his posture and leaned against a rock beside him in a slumped posture. However, Merlin still acted as if he was about to die. Something happened to Tiamat's seal, but it doesn't matter. The seal hasn't been completely broken, and I can still hold on. Cough cough. Merlin said something that Godotzi couldn't understand while coughing up more blood. Mr. Merlin, are you sure there's no problem? Once again, Mashu struggled to kick away an attacking Uxiu Mughar. She could not help but turn to look at Merlin. Merlin's current situation was really worrying. The amount of blood he vomited should be enough for him to leave the stage, right? Ahaha, it's okay, it's okay. After all, I'm not a human. It's normal for me to vomit more blood than a human. At this point, Merlin still smiled humorously. After that, the sound of chains came from beside everyone. Since Merlin said so, then he must be fine. She beheaded 1 or 2 Uxiu Mughar that wanted to sneak up on her with her scythe. She dodged the sputtering purple blood from the demonic beast's wounds and jumped to Godotzi and the other's side. The sound of chains came from the chains on Anna's scythe. Ahaha, Anna, you're still as sharp-tongued as ever. Show some concern for me, Merlin laughed. I'm just telling the truth. Although Anna really wanted to kill Merlin, there was no doubt that Merlin had the highest tacit understanding with Anna. Since Merlin said so, then he was not forcing himself. He must be fine, at least he would not leave the stage. After Anna finished speaking, she looked in the direction of the north wall and then left to kill other mass-produced demonic beasts. Even if the demonic beasts were strengthened, they would still die as long as their heads were cut off. This was the disadvantage of demonic beasts as beasts. By the way, Senior, should we let Mr. Merlin retreat? Looking at Merlin's condition, if no one was watching, a demonic beast might come and take him away. Matthew was really worried. Don't worry, don't worry. Although I'm a little weak now, I still have means to protect myself. Anna will kill the other mass-produced demonic beasts. You guys go and support Quizzard. Don't worry about me. But, however, when Matthew was about to say something, Godotzi interrupted Matthew. Let's go, Matthew. We have to believe in Merlin. This was a very important point that Godotzi had learned along the way, to believe in one's companions. That's right, that's right. I don't want to die meaninglessly. After all, I still have an important mission. Merlin's eyes flashed with a rare trace of seriousness. Yes, I know, Senior. Mr. Merlin too. Take care. Then, Godotzi and Matthew left Merlin to support Quizzard. After all, before the demonic beasts were inexplicably strengthened again, they had been reduced to a considerable number by everyone. Therefore, there were not many mass-produced Uxiumugals. In addition, Anna was constantly cleaning up, so there were basically no mass-produced Uxiumugals. However, the so-called fish that slipped through the net still existed. A few Uxiumugals somehow came behind Merlin, who was sitting on the ground. They were silent, like wild beasts about to capture their prey. One of the mass-produced Uxiumugals seemed to want to be the first beast to eat the crab. It was one step faster than the other mass-produced demonic beasts and slowly approached Merlin, while the other demonic beasts were in a state of observation. The demonic beasts could sense that the existence in front of them had a lot of magic power and was probably not to be trifled with. Therefore, when faced with such an enemy, one of the demonic beasts would often take the lead to test the waters. When this mass-produced Uxiumugals was almost close to Merlin, Merlin was still in a state of not noticing anything unusual. In the end, this Uxiumugals suddenly jumped up and pounced directly at Merlin's neck. It looked like it wanted to bite off Merlin's neck in one breath. However, before this mass-produced Uxiumugals could land in the air, a bright holy sword pierced through its head, and it died instantly. This posed a threat to the remaining demonic beasts who wanted to attack Merlin. They were so scared that they scrambled in other directions. However, Merlin would not leave a passerby who might be attacked by these escaping demonic beasts in the lurch. Merlin raised his staff and gently tapped the ground. Several beams as thick as light cannons were fired at the demonic beasts who had not yet run far. The last wails of the demonic beasts reached Merlin's ears. There was no doubt that they had hit. I really am a magician. Chapter 970. These were the words of a court magician whose swordsmanship was better than King Arthur's. Following that, Merlin threw the fake Excalibur in his other hand far away, along with the magic beast carcass on the fake sacred sword, far away from Merlin. Phew! Fortunately, the seal was not completely broken. Really, did Gorgon come directly to the north wall to fight with the Villo? After muttering a few words, Merlin closed his eyes and sneaked into the dream, to begin the repair of Tiamat's seal. While the various lines of defense in Mesopotamia were in crisis, Wuming also faced a new situation. Although Wuming was very worried about the North Wall, the jungle, and the Persian Gulf, he had to deal with the matter at hand. After Gorgon roared at the sky like a madman, a giant dark green snake appeared in front of Wuming. However, there were traces of slight corrosion on the ground leading to the north wall. It seemed that this poisonous snake came from the north wall. So that's how it is, the monster commander hiding in the dark is responsible for attacking the north wall. Wuming instantly understood why this giant monster appeared here. It was probably summoned by Gorgon and rushed here from the front line to support Gorgon. Roar! The giant dark green snake roared at Wuming. Not only that, but when the other party roared, an outrageous amount of purple saliva fell to the ground, instantly causing an extremely violent corrosion reaction on the bare ground. Obviously, its mouth contained a shocking amount of venom. With this alone, Wuming recognized the identity of the other party. The big poisonous snake Basumu. Although it was said to be a poisonous snake, it looked more like a dragon. Especially at the back of its head, there was a pair of soft horns full of barbs. Moreover, its entire head looked incomparably hard, as if it was wearing a helmet. Its 2 pairs of 4 large eyes were emitting a red light, looking quite horrifying. However, although it was a dragon, Basumu only had a pair of forelimbs. In addition, there was a long tail. Countless dark green scales were attached to the long tail like armor. There was also an unusually sturdy breastplate above the forelimbs. Not only that, but both sides of Basumu's body, spine, and tail were also full of spikes, especially the spikes on the tail. Not only that, these spikes were also shining with dark green light and looked full of venom, but the degree of venom was not as strong as the venom in Basumu's mouth. Wuming judged this because of the degree of corrosion of the road leading to the north wall. This guy is a bit difficult to deal with. Wuming saw Basumu's uniqueness at a glance. First of all, Wuming had never encountered any mass-produced versions of Basumu. It was obvious that this was the only prototype of Basumu. This also meant that this Bashumu's specialized Bashumu was the first and only one. Secondly, this Basumu's body was covered with an unusually sturdy armor that could be seen with the naked eye. It was obvious that this was added by someone at a later stage. In other words, this Basumu's body was quite fragile and needed a sturdy armor. This was completely different from the other magical beast commanders. The other magical beast commanders had extremely tough bodies. Ulidim could withstand Wuming's multiple spells without dying. Ulidim was also completely killed by Ereshkigal's attacks several times. Basumu, on the other hand, gave people the feeling that his body was extremely fragile. However, sacrificing his physical strength also meant that Basumu must have strengths in other aspects. For example, Basumu's venom. Regardless of the time, place, or even the world, poison was something that people feared and avoided. Although its scale was not as big as a natural disaster, its degree of terror was no less than a natural disaster. Whether in mythology or history, there were many heroes who were killed by poison. The most typical example was the teacher of the Greek heroes that Wuming met in the Holy Grail War of the 14 Horsemen and the American Singularity, the Greek god Charon, who was of the same generation as Zeus. Sharon, who was poisoned to death by the venom of the viper hydra, could be said to be the most typical example. Since there were heroes who were poisoned to death, there were also many poison experts. The most typical example was Semiramis, who had poisoned Mordred half to death in the Holy Grail War of the 14 Horsemen. She was evaluated in history as the oldest poison killer. After becoming a heroic spirit, Semiramis' poison was undoubtedly fatal to her servants. Semiramis' control of poison had almost reached the peak. At that time, when Wuming intervened in the Holy Grail War between the Black and Red sides, most of the masters of the Red side were poisoned by Semiramis. They were controlled under the condition that they did not die. From this, it could be seen how powerful Semiramis' control of poison was. Moreover, not only was she a poison expert, it was said that in her hanging garden of Babylon, there was a big venomous snake. That's right, it was one of the 11 sons of Tiamat in front of Wuming, the big venomous snake, Basumu. Wuming didn't know where Basumu in Semiramis' hanging garden of Babylon came from, but after all, Semiramis was the queen of Assyria in the Mesopotamia region, so it was not surprising that Basumu existed in her hanging garden of Babylon. Basumu, who existed in the hanging garden of Babylon, could be said to be Semiramis' ghost card. If there was no accident when she used this ghost card on the enemy would undoubtedly die, whether it was a servant or a human. Of course, there was an exception to the existence of special abilities. In short, the Basumu in front of him was powerful. In Wuming's view, even if all the other demonic beast commanders were added together, they would not be able to defeat Basumu. If you want to ask why, for example, now, Basumu opened his mouth in the direction of Wuming, and countless purple liquids spurted out. It was like a flash flood, like a tsunami, sweeping over Wuming. The speed was so fast that Wuming almost couldn't react. Wuming, who was frowning, instantly jumped up and flew into the air. He even smelled a trace of poison. It was reasonable to say that even if it was a servant, after smelling such a trace of poison, there would be severe adverse reactions. But unfortunately, Wuming was immune to negative effects such as poison. This was all due to the effect of the dragon body. Wuming, who cheated every day, naturally made this spiritual base according to his body. Therefore, Wuming's spiritual base should also be immune to poison. However, the spiritual base was a spiritual base after all, not the body. The spiritual base was definitely much weaker than the body, so Wuming would definitely be affected by negative effects. Just like if Wuming was hit by Gorgon's petrification ray, he would definitely enter a slow petrification state. Therefore, Wuming avoided the petrification ray. Wuming's current spiritual base was equivalent to having a great resistance to negative effects. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.